Call to order. The board president will call this meeting to order at 6:30 PM. Meeting notice statement. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Berkeley Heights Board of Education was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice of this special Board of Education meeting was sent to the Star Ledger and the Courier News on May 15th, 2024, and was provided to all schools, PTO presidents, the BHEA president, and posted at the administration building. A copy was also provided to the public library and filed with the municipal clerk. Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Ms. Akiri? Ms. Bradford?
Present.
Dr. Forager?
Present.
Mr. Hyman?
Here.
Ms. Jolly?
Here.
Ms. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanley?
Here. At this point in our meeting, we did have a little change in our schedule. Of our agenda. We are going to have the BA Superintendent Search discussion first, followed by new business, and then comments from the public. We will then adjourn to executive session where no action will be taken. We'll return to public session at the end, just for adjournment. And we did that because we did not want the public to wait until after the executive session to come back and have their comments. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Ms. Patty Reese, Ms. Jean Cleary, and they are our superintendent search firm representatives here to discuss our superintendent search firm process. Thank you very much for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us and thank you for asking us to do your search. Do I need the microphone closer? We handed out a packet of information that we'll use for tonight. That we'll start with. There's an agenda of what we're going to do. But before we get there, I just want to make a few comments about the process from here on in. That I want to just remind you that this is a forward-thinking process. It's as we go through and when you determine what the credentials and criteria you are seeking for your next superintendent, you want to look at that with eyes towards the future. What credentials and criteria do you believe your district needs to move the schools forward? And so, as we go through that, I just want you to remind you to, again, forward thinking, but confine any comments to the future. I recommend not to make any comparative comments about what or wasn't done in the past, either here or in any other district, because that could open the board to some liability, and we really do want to prevent that for you. And so this process, once we get through this is kind of standard stuff, setting the credentials and criteria, setting the calendar for the future. And from here on in, though, once we do that and everything, confidentiality is of the utmost importance. And I do have that in your packet, but just some comments on that, just to remind you that candidates that are applying may not have told their existing district that they're seeking a position. And so if that information were to get out, it could be detrimental to their current employment, but it could also cause you, lack of confidentiality could cause you to lose candidates, because we've seen some just withdraw applications if that becomes forward. And then just in that one sheet talks about don't share the information with anybody, don't reach out to any contacts that you may have that you think may know the candidate. We generally, for the reference check, when we get to that point, when you've made your selection, we ask the candidate, the finalist, to provide us with at least one or two references for every board member. We strongly encourage that you call at least one of those reference checks and that they all be different. And we generally give the candidate about 48 hours once you're ready to go to reference checks for them to contact them. So the first order of business is really to look at the credentials and criteria that you may want, that you have a sheet in your packet that talks about this. And I think that it was sent out ahead of time.
Yes, it was sent out.
Okay, just before we start through this, the only thing required by law of your superintendent is that they have a standard administrator's certificate or they have a certificate of eligibility. Everything else is not required as we go through here. And so that becomes the difference between required and preferred. If you put something, say you want somebody that's a sitting superintendent and you make that a requirement, any candidate who does not have that position currently cannot apply. Well, they can apply, but you can't interview them based on what you list as required and preferred. So if there's something beyond the certificates, it's recommended that you do preferred. I mean, if you want them to have teaching experience again, and you say that you want X amount of years teaching experience, if a candidate presents that does not have that, you can't interview them. You'll see them because their information will be there, but the only way you could see somebody that's listed that doesn't meet your requirements would be to close the search and reopen it, which delays. Go ahead.
So a general ad is better than a more specific ad.
Yes, and when the candidates start coming in on this sheet, we'll classify those that meet all of your requirements or your preferred requirement or your what are preferred credentials will get an A. We rate them A, B, C. A being they meet all of your required and preferred credentials and criteria. B meaning they meet most of them. Minimally, they have to have the certificate. And C means there's some crucial ones they don't meet. And so though this is C candidates, you will see them because you will see when you get access to the site with all the applicants, you will see them, but you can see their paperwork, but you can't interview them simply
you.
because they don't meet the requirements that you set. So if we go through this, if you look at this, if you want to, I don't know if you've marked it up and we want to go through it one by one, or
Yes,
Gail,
please.
you want to just accumulate the data and send it to us. It's really up to what the board's preference.
Okay. So for certification and education. Yes, Mrs. Zakiri.
Looks like the documents we got in our packet are different. Like I have a different version than what Tom is looking at. In terms of the certification, I can show it to Mr. Nixon. The versions are different.
If you'll show it to Ms. Reese, please.
Is the difference between the one that was emailed and the one that you received?
This one has.
What items are, it could be just the way it printed. Yeah. Yeah, this is in the package. This one was in the packet.
No, this was in Tom's package. This was in mine.
Did you print yours out ahead of time? The one that, that was sent out? That could be what the difference is.
Yes.
It should have the same stuff.
So we should use what's.
What's in the packet sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, just to move it along.
Yeah, it's just out of it. It's the same stuff. It's just not in the same order.
If I could just suggest that we just use the one that's in the packet tonight, the content on the sheets should be the same, just formatted differently. So we apologize for any, change to that. If anyone sees a field that they aren't seeing on the form, we can address that, but at least we can move it along.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you. For number one, Roman numeral one, certification education discussion on this.
So I would like to see us putting in earned doctorate as preferred. When we've done our search for assistant superintendent, that our last two ones that we've hired have had doctorates. And, many of our staff as directors have doctorates, so I do think it would be preferred. So I would like to see that added. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
So preferred document is
No,
not
no, no,
required.
No, I don't,
Doctorate.
no, I don't want that. I don't want the earned doctorate.
Why?
It's not necessary. It's not a real doctorate. It's just like a term paper. You might write that in one semester. It doesn't add any value. So I don't think we need that.
So Mrs. Reese, I should take notes on yes and no. Is that correct on the form?
Right. I mean, process is a consensus-driven process. So you have one that would like to have the earned doctorate as a preferred requirement and one who feels, a board member who feels it isn't necessary. So if everybody else would weigh in, again, it would be a consensus of what?
Okay.
Then I
Um,
have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Khanna.
So can you help understand if we rate it as preferred, would that mean that it would impact the candidates that would go sort of in the A pool versus the B pool versus the C pool?
If you list it as preferred, it would put them, those that have it or close to it, as there are candidates that are in their dissertation process that apply, that would go into the A column. And if they didn't have one, it will go into the B column, but you could choose amongst the A and B candidates who you want. You can interview any of those. You can select any of those. It's just the C candidates that you can't. So if you put it as preferred, you could, if they had it, you could interview them. And if they didn't, you could interview them.
Yeah, and if you see right now online, right, I went on your website today and looked at the superintendent search ads that were currently open. A lot of them do have that they earn doctorate preferred. Again, right, like we can interview people that are not doctorate,
Right.
but it was just showing that that's what we're looking for.
Okay,
So if I may,
Mrs. Zakiri.
think if we want the pool to be open to internal candidates as well as be broad, I know there are multiple districts around us who are currently looking for superintendents. Milburn is looking, I think New Providence just closed. So I prefer not having this requirement. That way we can open it up to additional candidates. It doesn't prevent somebody with an earned doctorate from applying for this position, correct? It's just an ad.
Right.
So
It's
I,
just saying preferred or just not listing. And if it's not listed, if they have it, they have it. If they don't, they don't. It doesn't really impact who you can interview.
and this is not a PhD, it's like
It's whatever. If
it's
it's an earned doctorate, PhD, EDD.
EDD, most
Yeah.
in the education
There
industry.
are some PhDs. There are actually some people out there who have an EDD and a doctor and a legal degree, a jurisprudence degree.
What is after that? What is after the EDD? EDD and?
EDD, PhD.
Uh-huh.
Or I've seen several candidates in the state that also have a jurisprudence doctorate.
Okay.
So,
got it.
I mean, it doesn't, having it preferred just says that's what you would prefer, doesn't mean that's only what you will accept.
Mrs. Jolly, your opinion?
I take the point about potentially internal candidates, and maybe that was a question I had as well. Is there, can we, if there are internal candidates that we might be interested in, is the criteria then the same, different? Can we kind of, delineate in that respect?
The criteria will be the same for every candidate, whether they're internal or external. If they're internal, they need to go through the same exact process as every other candidate. Do the application, get mixed into the pool, and then you can select from your list of candidates. When we deliver the pool of candidates, you can select from whoever they are. But for internal candidates and for you, I mean, selecting a superintendent is the biggest job that you have, right? It's the most important thing that you do because they will lead the district. So you want, with internal candidates and external, you want to do your full due diligence. And you want to have them go through the same exact process. And then if you have an internal candidate and they rise to the top, then that really sets both the board and the internal candidate up for success, because you can go to the community and say, we've gone through this process. We've interviewed how many different candidates, and this person rose to the top. And they then can go to the public and say, I didn't get any special considerations. I've got what everybody else did. And it just really helps set both entities up for success with your community, if that's the way that it goes.
Mrs. Jolly, your opinion?
Regarding, I guess if it's not going to, if it's not going to disqualify somebody, if it's a preference, not a requirement, if somebody feels strongly, I don't have an objection to it being listed.
So you would go with preferred. Mr. Hyman?
Yep, I feel the same. I don't think it impacts our pool either way. So I think, yes.
Mrs. Khanna?
I wouldn't put it as a preferred qualification.
I would put it as a preferred, so it would be preferred then.
Okay.
Do we have to do anything under school administration certificate? Because those are both required, so we don't need to.
Well, yeah, the school administrator is required, the New Jersey School Principal Certificate, they don't necessarily need to have that. And that we just ask if they have it or if they're eligible for it.
So we would want to put possess in that, is that correct?
It put it preferred or leave it.
Okay.
So I have a question on this one.
Mrs. Akiri?
So the question is, if we are looking at nationwide pool of candidates, some of them might not be having this certification. They might be eligible for getting it. So are we automatically eliminating somebody who wants to apply and who wants to get this certification?
When you put that, they have to have the certification or the certificate of eligibility. So they may not have the full certificate because they've simply not sat in the seat. And if you have somebody who has a certificate of eligibility, by making it required, it's going to say certificate of standard certificate or certificate of eligibility. That's what's required because that's what's required by law. If they do not have the standard certificate, meaning they have not been sat in a superintendent seat, but they have the certification, you would have to then you would have to pay for a mentor, which is set in statute for that person.
Yeah, so my question is, can somebody from Pennsylvania apply? If we make this a New Jersey School Administrator certification, someone who's a superintendent in Pennsylvania for a K-12 district or Delaware, can they apply or not?
If you want, and this comes up in northern part of the state and the southern part, by law in New Jersey, they have to have the standard or the certificate of eligibility. They could be in Pennsylvania and still have a New Jersey certificate. If they, if it depends on where they went to, where they got their, they got their degree. If they're going to work in New Jersey by law, they have to, and if they don't have the a New Jersey certificate, they have to apply for it, before they can start. They also, and it's not, the reciprocity is not as easy in other states. New Jersey doesn't accept, if you have a Pennsylvania certificate, but no New Jersey, there's a process that they would have to go through to apply for the New Jersey certificate. It's not a given that if you have a certificate of a superintendent or administrative certificate in another state, that New Jersey just accepts it. There's a process they have to go through, but they also would have to move to New Jersey within 6 months.
My question is for teachers, and I saw this during pandemic and after pandemic, New Jersey had said, if you can get it in the next 12 months, or, we do hire some of these teachers. So you're saying if we don't make this a requirement, then we can have applicants from other states with experience, but they might not have the certificate. They'll have to get a mentor. They'll have to move to New Jersey. Of course, if they're applying for this position, they have to physically be here, and they will have to get the certificate. Until they get the certificate, we have to get them a mentor. Is that right?
It depends on if New Jersey gives them the standard certificate or the certificate of eligibility.
But-
The only time you have to provide a mentor is for the certificate of eligibility, whether they're in state or out of state.
Okay, now, a quick process question. Do we have to finalize these requirements today at this meeting, or can we give you feedback like later?
There's two answers to that.
Mhm.
We were, it doesn't necessarily have to be tonight
Mhm.
to start off with, but we were asked to provide two dates of start dates. And so if you want to, and maybe that's the discussion next, then if you want a January 1, 2025 start date, then we need to do this today. We need to get the ad posted by the beginning of January. I'm sorry, the beginning of July. And then you will be doing your candidate interviews in August. Because as you go through the calendar, it's more, if you pick up go in your packet, and we gave the two list calendars. The January 1st start date, how we arrive at the dates initially is if you want, and we start at the back end, we start at the bottom. So if you want them to start January 1st, 2025, then your most contracts in New Jersey, most superintendent contracts have a 60-day clause, meaning they give notice and for 60 days. Some districts may let them out of that clause, some don't. There are a few out there that may be 90 or 120, but the bulk are 60 days. So that means you have to, at a public meeting by November 1st, appoint that person. Then you need to get the contract approved by your county superintendent. They, at this time, are requesting a 30-day turnaround period. So that brings you to October 1st. We estimate about 2 weeks for negotiations between your board attorney and the finalist's attorney for contract negotiations. So that brings you to September 16th. If you want to do a third round interview, we're now in the early September. And then we back into second round interviews in late August and first round interviews in mid-August. That's if the ad goes up for June 1st for about 5 to 6 weeks. And then we bring the pool to you. We do a pool delivery, what we call it. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at both these attachments in the packet. One of them says superintendent start date January 1st, 2025. The other one says superintendent July 1st, 2025 start date. both these calendars start with May 20th as the first date to refine.
That's tonight.
That's tonight. So, and then the second date on the calendar is May 30th. They're both the same. So irrespective of if we want a superintendent to start on January 1st or July 1st, the first, second, and third set of dates on this calendar, no, actually 6 set of dates on this calendar are exactly same. How is that?
Well, the 20th is because that's what we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
The 30th, either way, because we want to get the ad out in June and July, because that's when a lot of people are looking. They're not necessarily, once the school year starts, they're not necessarily looking. Now, if you do a July 1st, 2025 start date, then that first date when the ad appears, you can extend that. You don't have to do that on May 30th. You could have that date start August 1st or whenever you would like it to
So
start.
this falls back to my earlier question. Do we have to finalize the criteria on your checklist tonight, or can we ask you questions, have discussion, and then provide our input back? We all have this in a soft copy format.
I suggest that we try to get through this tonight, and that's the goal, right? The goal is to finish this tonight, so that way we can continue to move forward. Because as you can see, even the timelines are very tough, and it's in the middle of the summer where most of us are busy and it's hard to get together and make decisions. So I do think that trying to do that tonight would be the goal, right? That's why we have them here tonight to walk us through and answer questions as we do this.
But
So
Also-
for this, the school administrator certification,
Mhm.
I noticed
have
in
a-
your draft, right?
Gail, I
It's,
had a.
Just
wait,
wait.
but I have the
She
floor.
interrupted me.
No,
This
I
was-
didn't. You finished your question.
No, I
New
was
Jersey
asking-
School
Mrs. Stanley has the
Administrator.
floor,
No,
Mrs.
Mrs.
Zakiri.
Stanley-
For
Patty never
certificate of
responded.
eligibility required, right? So it's in your draft that you sent us. It says NJ School Administrator or certificate of eligibility required. So does that, right? That kind of gives us that eligible for, right, area is what we're requiring, right? That you don't already have to have it, but you're eligible to get it and that you could get
Either
it,
have it or you're eligible to get it.
right?
That's
So we,
required.
right, so we don't have to put that you must possess it currently, but that you're eligible to try to.
Right,
Yeah.
that's that first bullet point, that's why it's.
So
worded
my
that way.
suggestion
Everything-
would be putting under that first one, putting eligible for as required, right? Because we know that
Right.
state statute says that they have to have it, so we're going to say eligible for. And that way we don't have to limit our candidates by saying you must already possess it.
Right.
Does
Mrs.
anybody
Zakiri,
agree?
you had something
Uh,
else?
Mrs. Bradford, I would like to clarify certain ground rules before we proceed. I asked a question from Patty Reese and the other representative at
Mrs.
NJSB.
Zakiri, I understand.
No,
Please
I-
ask your question now.
Can you read my mind? I didn't finish my question. The question was to the NJSBA representatives. It was answered by Mrs. Stanley. So if we're going to continue this and have a productive evening, I think we all need to accept to some ground rules. If the question from a board member is to NJSBA, I would like them to answer and not a board member or the board president.
Mrs. Zakiri, please ask your question.
Yes, and not so. Going back to my question, if we are choosing to go with the July 1st, 2025 date, do we have to decide on the requirements for every single requirement? We have to try for today, but do we have time to discuss, ask you questions, discuss, and then get back to you on what our requirement is?
For a July 1st, 2025 start date, yes, you do have.
And if it's a
Doesn't have to be
January
the same.
1st, 2025 start date, do we at least get 24 hours or no?
You could have 24 hours, and then, however, your board president wants to manage that. The goal is to get the ad up May 30th, May 30th is the Friday, or June 1st, the Saturday. As they said, we go up forward between 4 and 6 weeks. The ad is usually.
See, the only concern here is this is a volunteer role. We all have our day jobs and whatever we do. This is the most critical hire that we
Mhm.
do for the district. So I don't want us to be hurried into making a decision right now by a vote of, are you decided or not? If we have questions on a particular requirement, we'll ask you, but we do not, if the ad is going up on May 30th, then I think 48 hours prior to that, if we all got back to you, we should at least get like 3 to 4 days to get your input and get back to you. It shouldn't be that we are discussing with you, you give us your input, we can go research, we can go look at how NJSBA has handled other superintendent searches, just happened in the neighboring town. So we do have time. The answer is we have time to get back to you.
If you select the July 1st, 2025, you definitely have time.
And
You
for,
have less time, much less, if you want the start date to be January 1st.
Okay, thank you.
If I-
Mr. Hyman?
If I may.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
I'm
Mrs. Clear.
Just one point though to remember is that even though July is further out, there are times of the year, like cyclically, where we see superintendents that are looking, right? So they don't want to make a commitment and can't make a commitment to a district and then midway change. So some of the dates that we set up were to gather the most, increase the likelihood that you're going to get a good pool of responses, because this is when people are looking for it. So January 1st is tight, so putting any decisions off can impact that. But even with the July being further out, there are things up front that you do better with, because even superintendents go away for summers and they kind of already have plans set of where they're going to be in the following year. So it is impacted. So just to keep that in mind.
Mr. Hyman?
Yeah, that's sort of the spirit of what I wanted to say. I do think our clock's been ticking on this since, I don't know, about New Year's Day-ish, maybe Christmas. So I mean, maybe we want to pivot to a discussion as to which of these timelines we want to be on, just to get consensus on that. Because, yeah, I mean, in my head, I think we should move and endeavor to try to get some consensus on at least the attributes here tonight. If we need 24 hours to maybe finalize some things and clean it up, totally fine. But I'm of the mindset that, yeah, the talent pool is gonna open up. I think we've selected NJSBA for a lot of reasons, including the fact that a lot of great talent is in this state and surrounding states. And so I'd like to take their advice and try to get this thing moving.
Just a reminder to the board that our acting superintendent's contract expires May 30th. It has not been extended. So we are under a timeline. So can I have a
can
show
I-
of hands for the July 1st?
Mrs. Bradford, can I
Mrs.
clarify?
Akiri?
Yeah, so this news that it is not extended, this is new. This is the first time I'm hearing it. So where is this news coming from? The last action was to extend, and we can continue to extend the acting superintendent, correct?
We could extend it to June 30th, but that is the limit from Mr. Palminieri.
Is it in writing?
We do not have an interim at this time. And we have not been able to choose an interim superintendent.
No, my question is, did the county superintendent, Mr. Palmieri, say that we cannot extend an acting superintendent beyond June 30th?
He wants us to take some action.
Was that in writing?
It was not in writing, but we could ask him for that.
So how did you find this information?
I spoke with him.
And this is the first time you felt it was appropriate to share with the board?
Mrs. Akiri, this is the first time we've met since I spoke with Mr. Palminieri.
Okay.
So can we move on with this
I have a
application?
follow-up question on this.
Yes.
On
Mrs.
so-
Akiri.
what is the thought process in if the July 21st, 2025 is the start date? The ad is both the timelines on both the calendars, the timelines, the first 6 actions are exactly the same. So if we do go with the 2025, or God forbid, we go with the January 1st, 2025, and we are not, we cannot meet, or we're not happy with the pool of candidates that we get the first round. So is there another ad that's going to go out?
If you're not, if the board consensus is there, they don't like the pool of candidates, or you don't feel you have enough candidates, yes, we would close the ad and then reopen it with the recommendation of perhaps changing, and that wouldn't affect your contract for one time. It would not, but maybe revisiting the credentials and criteria that you're requiring.
So in this calendar, do we have, when do you close the ad? I know you opened the ad on May 30th. When do you close for both these dates?
In both, we listed the deadline for applications as July 12th.
So that's when the ad comes down.
The ad comes, yes, the ad comes down and the pool of candidates is what the pool of
Is logged in.
Right. And so if you look, the next date, July 29th, is when we propose to present the pool of candidates and give you access to the website. But backtracking to your question, the reason the dates are the same in the beginning is, as Jean said, we want to get you the most candidates, and more are looking in July and August. Once they start the school year, many people are reluctant to leave their district mid-year. Also what played into this is my understanding of the input sessions with your community staff and community and staff has already been worked out for June 4th, 5th, and 6th. So it would be helpful if we had the ads out for them so that they know what they're looking for.
No, I'm fine with the understanding of, there is July and we want everybody who wants to apply and who's interested to come in. But my concern here is, I think for the July 1st, 2025, a deadline for a superintendent to start, the final round of interviews end on March 3rd of 2025. Whereas for the January 1st, the final round is finished by September 9th. So where does the board get to give you feedback that, hey, we are not happy with this pool that you gave us?
We would, if you look on the dates where we give you the pool delivery, what that means is on that date, we'll come together, and that's done in executive session because it's all the candidates. We talk about the next steps of the process, and we give you access to the website to for a week or so to review all the applicants, every piece of documentation that you have. At the pool delivery, we also tell you who the A, B, and C candidates are.
So you give us the pool delivery on July 29th, and we have until August
2nd.
August 7th,
Second.
2nd for in both these cases?
On both days, yeah. One, I just didn't write it on the second.
No, I think for the 25th, it's a little longer, I guess, right?
No, I have it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
January.
I think for the 25th, it's a little board reviews and selects the candidates for interview by Jan 2025. Correct?
I'm sorry.
Am I reading this correct? So if we are going with the start date of January 1st, 2025, we get the pool delivery of candidates by July 29th, and the board gets technically 3 days to review and select candidates for interview, not a week. Is that a correct assumption?
So the pool delivery, just to clarify something, when we turn it over, the pool delivery is now giving you access to go into the system and see all of the applicants and all of the things that they've submitted.
Yeah.
That can't stay open forever. That's a limited process because you're dealing with very confidential information. So you have a select period of time that you get to review it and then come back together. But in the January 1st, 2025, you have from July 29th to August 2nd, right? Considering the time frame that you'd be on. And on the July 1st, 2025 for superintendent to start, you're looking at January 13th to 17th. So again, about 4 days that you would have that. So it's the same process. several days. It's just located in a different spot depending on when the start date for the superintendent would be.
Mr. Hyman had a question. Oh, Mrs. Jolly.
Sorry, so then looking at the July 1st calendar of 2025, there's obviously quite a bit of gap, right, between when the pool was delivered and then we have the days to review. So, and in the interim, it's not like we're advertising for any additional candidates, right? It's just the pool that happened to come in the same, and the July 29th date is the same on both calendars. So it feels like a little bit of wasted time, if you will. So, and maybe folks will, number one, may have found other jobs and the pool would have been
Right.
reduced quite a bit. So this time frame doesn't make sense to me a little bit because again, it's quite a big wait and we're likely to lose quite a few candidates while we wait.
Mr. Hyman, you want to follow?
Yeah, I mean, we're spending precious time talking about two different scenarios. I'm not trying to rush us along, but I'd be nice if we could have some consensus on one of the calendars so that the rest of the conversation could maybe be grounded in that. I don't know. I know we're not voting on anything, but is it out of line for us to straw poll it and get some sense? That's my question.
My
Okay,
question
straw
is,
poll on January 25 or July 2025.
so
Reminder, of course, that without a full-time superintendent, there are a number of positions that are not going to be able to be filled, that need to be filled. Mrs. Akiri, your opinion?
So before I vote, I just want to clarify, if we're going with the January 1st, 2025 date, we get the pool delivery on the 29th, close of business, I guess. And we have to select the candidates between 30th to August 2nd. So how much time does the board get? We're not starting to interview until August 12th. So why do we have to select within 3 days?
I mean, we can extend that to a week, but it's because it's highly confidential information. And we generally give boards like, a couple days to a week or 10 days at most to review them.
So what's the average? So we
So it's
can
5 days?
We can do
No,
5
my
days.
question is, if the pool is, let's say, 12 to 15 candidates, it's just not feasible with our day jobs or whatever we're doing to get back to you and finalize give you a list of selected candidates for interview. If the interviews are not starting until August 12th, and this is all summer, given that, assuming we are all here, can we not extend the time here? Why is it 3 days to look at 15 resumes?
We can certainly do 5 days.
It's 5 days.
The challenge is, once you give us your list of candidates, we then need to contact them to schedule all their interviews. So we need at least a week to 10 days to do that, especially during the summer. So that's partially why that time is built into the July 1st one.
And how does that process of selected candidates work? Does the board need to meet, look at, so we will rate the resumes that we receive, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So the 7 of us or the 8 of us will basically rate the resumes that we received in those 5 days. It's not even 5 business days. So I'm just asking, can we get at least a week, 5 business days to give you feedback? If the resume, what is the average number of resumes that you deliver to a district our size?
Depending on the
Yes.
district, we've been getting.
They are business days.
About
Right. So Mrs. Akiri, January 2025 or July 2025?
My birthday is a Sunday. It's the 4th of August.
Mrs. Akiri, do you have your
Again, I
opinion?
think we've spent like half an hour now
Yes.
trying to figure out ways to delay this trying to figure out why we need to delay it or ways that we want to delay it, or could we delay it, or if we want to delay it. So again, we really just have to focus on what we need to do tonight. And again, I would love to see us do it by January 1st, 2025.
Got it.
That would be my goal. I don't know if this board can do that.
Right.
I
Dr.
think
Forager,
that's struggling.
what would you say?
Well, at the rate we're going, it's gonna be more like January 1, 2027. But
I agree.
I'd like to get this done. So I'll go for, it looks to me like you should really view the July 1 as kind of a fallback position. If somehow you don't like what happened in the initial try, January 1.
So you're
Try for-
shooting for
Yeah, I would
January.
say try for January 1, but I
Thank you.
view this other one as more like
Okay.
if you didn't get anybody you liked for January 1, then you're basically gonna. try
Mrs.
again.
Akiri, I'll come back to
So
you.
I'm gonna say January 1.
So I also want to get this done sooner, but there is basically a saying back home, just because you want to get somewhere, you don't get on the first ride that stops for you, you know? I
Mhm.
grew up in a village, so you want to get to the city, you don't just
Mrs.
jump on
Akiri,
a, no.
January or July?
Mrs. Bradford, you don't interrupt somebody, any the board member when they give their opinion. And I'm just giving you my
I'm trying
opinion.
to move this meeting along, which is my
Yes.
role as president.
Yes, I appreciate
January
it.
or July.
So just like you allowed 1 minute for other board member to say, I'm just saying in the spirit of us getting to January 1st, I don't want to pick anything. I want to clarify some questions on how many days does the board get. So you're asking us in summer for January 1st, we get the pool at the close of business on July 29th, and then we have 5 days to get back. So basically the board has to meet, I assume. That's a clarification I still want to ask before I decide. Because I do have some planned travel and I did communicate this to you about summer. So without clarifying, do you want to just jump on like this old saying from my village? You want to get to the first ride that comes along is a bullock cart. Do you want me to get on that, or do you want to wait for a bus that gets me there sooner?
Thank you. Mrs. Khanna, January or July?
I'm on the same page as Tom. I think we should try for January. July is a bit of a fallback, but I want to make sure that the number of days for all of these steps that are on the January schedule makes sense. I have concerns, the same that she has in terms of the time that we have to review the pool of candidates, deliberate and come back to you with, here is a short list of here's the people that we want to interview. Now, the one thing that isn't very clear to me, maybe you can help me, is for the other searches that you have been involved in, have you seen this timeline being successful for a district our size, or you have a feel for Berkeley Heights? Have you seen this timeline being successful?
I think I have. It's aggressive, and it requires commitment from the board for the different meetings. I have seen it. As I said, as long as the board is committed to that process, that of all the interviews in mid-August. I will say that if we move we're getting in the January 1st, 5 days to review the applications. If you go beyond that, we need time to contact the people for interviews. That gives us a week to contact everybody to get the interview schedule going. We may need to move those interviews out. Beyond that.
So sorry. So is this something, when we contemplate the ad as it's sent out to candidates, is that something that you would put in the ad in terms of giving them some idea of the timing of the interviews?
Yes. Well,
You-
we would put in the ad when the ad closes and when the projected start date is. So they would know that they're applying for a position where the board is expecting them to start January 1st. So given that, they would expect that the interviews would be in August or early September.
Right, so where I'm going with is people make plans for the summer, right? So
Yeah.
they might be applying now, but they might have a vacation planned already, right?
Well,
Or in
and-
the process of. So I'm trying to understand, if we put the ad now, would we also in the ad include that, there will be interviews starting, I don't know, 12th of August or 15th of August? Is that included? Are we that specific?
We don't generally put that in the ad. Part of the, contract that you have is that we, all your, we pre-interview all your candidates, before, you sort your interview. And those are questions we would ask, basic, we ask very basic questions, not anything that takes it out of the decision out of the board, right? But things like, are you available for interviews in August? Are you making sure that they understand that the start date, if that's what you select, is January 1? Those kinds of information. Why are they leaving where they are? Why do they want to come to Berkeley Heights?
So on this, the point about, how long do we have? If we get the pool delivery end of business on July 29th, I believe that's the Monday. That's my birthday.
Is it end of business or is it?
Maybe. I'm sorry?
Is it end of business? I didn't hear you guys say that. I heard a board member say that, but when on the 29th?
When do we get it?
It really, it depends. It can be the end of the business day. It can also be at 11, midnight.
The preceding night.
But the previous, so on Sunday night, or are we talking Monday night? Because that's a whole day gone. So the concern is we seem to be making a very critical decision on who do we want to interview and bring into the next round in, I don't know, 3 business days, it seemed
5.
like. So
it's
my
not
question
5.
is, sorry, Jordan, did you say?
Well, it's 5 days. I mean, I still, I'm not, unless there's clarification on the exact time when it's
Right.
open. If it's open.
I
at
mean,
midnight-
for 5
that-
days, we could do it at midnight, but then your president would just need to relay that list to us as soon as possible so that we can start getting the interviews. Because if you go through the like midnight on Friday, we would really need it first thing Monday morning so that we could start reaching out to the candidates that you want to interview, and to make sure that, to get them time to come in and interview.
I'm
So-
not, can you say that one more time? When do we get it? Do we get it on the Monday night? And we
On the
have to
29th, yes, we will come in.
I think asking like,
Oh, what time will you get on the 29th?
Yes.
We need to meet with you and present it. So whatever time you schedule your meeting for, we'll go through the basic precepts. We ask that you bring whatever device you're going to view them on with you to that meeting. And before you leave, we want you all to log in to make sure that you get access that night. And if there's any glitches, that we have time to work that out.
So
So that night, whatever time. if
So what
you're-
we're saying is there is a board meeting on July 29th.
Correct. The pool
That
delivery would
the
have.
pool delivery is an in-person activity. It is
Yes.
not, we will send you an email and we
No,
click
no,
it.
no,
Okay,
it's-
that wasn't clear to me,
I'm
so
sorry.
sorry. So we have a meeting on the 29th, and then we have 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and by Friday, 4 days. So Friday, end of day is when the schedule says we have to get back to you
Mhm.
with a list of,
Right.
shortlisted candidates.
Right.
Is that right?
That's correct. So if you want, I mean, when you look at the calendar, we have the first round interviews on the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Okay. And if we, as a board, need more time for that deliberation, we might not have access to the pool given the information in it, but could we still take a few more days in the next week to have the deliberation, have the conversation, and get back to you with our shortlist? Is there flex in the schedule for that?
That would only be able to happen if you did not have the first round interviews on the 12th, 13th, and 14th. If you pushed it back to the 19th, 20th, and 21st, that would also push back, because we need about a week between to have enough time to contact the applicants. So that would push back the second round, and if you have a third round, it would also push that back. It just, if you went back to the next week, you would have it would also impact how much time the attorneys have, if you select the finalists, how much time the attorneys have to negotiate the contract. I mean, so that right now we're giving you 2 weeks, but if everything's pushed back a week, you may have less than a week for that contract negotiations because you have to get it to Mr. Palmieri by October 1st. So it can
So-
be done. It just,
So my
Yes,
feedback is January is a good goal to have, but this timeline is a tad unrealistic.
And Mr. Hyman, January or July?
Without a doubt, January. Agree, it is aggressive, but
It is.
that, I think the community, I would hope at this point, would want us to be aggressive.
Mrs. Jolly?
Just a quick question around the, because I guess I didn't realize that July 29th had to be a meeting. Is there, if I have travel plans, is there a way that prior to maybe the 29th or remote that I test whatever access I need? Because I could still look at candidates while away because it wasn't clear that this had to be a meeting until just now. So it's possible to test my access.
I mean, your access would still be that night. I don't
Mhm.
know what is your board policy for board members attending remotely.
We do not have a policy for board members to attend remote.
So it wasn't so much to attend remotely, but not to to have the access without having been at the meeting if I can't make it to the meeting.
The challenge is that we, at that meeting, we provide other information like not only the potential interview, well, we provide, we ask you to select the questions that you're going to provide that you'd like to ask all the candidates on the first round. So there's other information.
Right.
So you would get that night. I mean, we wouldn't open it, couldn't open it earlier.
Okay.
You just might not have opportunity to have your questions asked and answered.
Okay. But since the meetings are recorded, I mean, granted, like I
Well,
will be
this
missing
be
out.
Executive
Oh,
session.
this will
It
be
was not
executive. Okay.
because you're looking at candidates' confidential information. So it would be an executive session. And so it would not be recorded.
So I have a follow-up question. Patty?
Excuse me, I just need Mrs. Jolly for January. Is that correct?
So yes, I am also in favor of a January start date, but understanding that I will be able to get access to the candidates, even if I'm not able to attend the meeting.
I also agree with the January, so that's
And-
unanimous.
and let me
Mrs.
just-
Curie, you had
can
a
I just
question?
Well, I didn't vote and I have two questions. On these two calendars, which are for which of these tasks do you need board meetings? That's not listed here.
Okay.
So the other concern here is with the July 29th, we get 4 business days to get back to you, technically. So we get it on Monday. It has to be a board meeting, and in exec, we're going to get some information. So if there are board members that are unable to be here, and I have plans to travel internationally, and if we cannot attend exec or a board meeting in person, then that's a no-go. But I don't know about the others, but how does the board review applicants and select candidates for interview? Does that need to be a board meeting?
No, that's on your own time.
So
How do
when
we?
we deliver the pool, we're training you to have login access into the system, and then you read them independently.
No,
through
no.
the system.
The selecting of the action here on between 29th and the August 2nd, in 4 business days, we have to review the pool, and the action is the board selects candidates for interview. How does the board reviews applicants and select candidates for interview for both these dates? So how does a board as a whole select the candidates for interview?
And generally what's done is that we provide you with like a grid that you select, each individual board member selects who they'd like to interview. And then you provide that information to your board president, who then goes through the list and by consensus, or whatever consensus is. So if the board decides that any candidate that gets two board members to want to interview and they want to interview, that's fine. Or if the board decision is that they must have a majority of board members that want to interview, that is up to the board. So you would go through the candidates and you would identify who you individually would like to interview. All board members do that individually and send it to the board president, who would then collate that information, and based on the desires of the board, as I said, do you want to interview candidates that two board members want, or do you want three or more board members to agree? You can interview however many the board chooses to interview.
Ms. Reese, can that pool be open through the weekend?
We can, if you can coordinate, but we would need the week really to get the interview schedules going. So we'd need the information of the board's candidates by like 9 a.m. Monday morning.
Thank
If
you.
you can do that, we can do that. But I will say, I will need to ask our legal if board members who are not at the meeting that are traveling, if they can have access. But, I'll do that and I'll get that information, I'll ask that question tomorrow and I will get that information back to you.
Thank you. So it looks like
Uh,
we're going to go with the aggressive schedule for January 2025.
Gail, I
We'll
had a
move on
follow-up.
to the number 2 agenda. Oh, Mrs. Khanna?
As we go through this process, does NJSBA have a portal, a tool, what is the mechanism for us to give this input, whatever we provide even to the president? Is that just an Excel sheet? Do you guys have a website where we go and actually put in information? Can you specify that?
Right. It's not a website. It's essentially either a spreadsheet or a Word document that I email to your board president. I could email it for the electronic copy, but at that meeting on the 29th, I would bring hard copies for each board member to sort through as they go through the candidates.
So
So
I had two
you had a
questions.
question?
I had two questions. On this calendar, on both these calendars, which are the tasks that you need a board meeting for?
Okay.
If you can get me that, because this is the first time we are all hearing that we have to be here on July 29th, and that is, I don't even know if that's doable at this time, given what we have planned for, and we were not informed that we have to meet in person in exec to get some additional information. Also, I feel that the task here says board reviews applicants and selects candidates for review. I think if we are coming out to a consensus or a decision, we cannot be doing that via email or in an exec session. So we review the candidates, and it has to be, if a board is taking action or decision on whom to interview, it has to be in a public session, I guess, on
No,
whom.
because it's confidential. We're still in the confidential stage.
Yeah.
So what meetings do we need to be in person? So we can get that
Mrs. Reyes
established.
answer the
So-
question.
Yeah,
Okay. Mrs. Reese, would you give us those dates?
yes, the dates that would require a board meeting, and from here on in, it would be executive session, would be July 29th. The interview dates of August 12th, 13th, and 14th. August 26th, 27, and September 9. Those would require meetings, executive session meetings. And the interviews, and we would get into that more at the pool delivery. There's a process on how that's organized as well. I just thought that's just a lot of information for tonight. And the reason you didn't know this ahead of time is that's the purpose of this meeting, is to go over dates and to go over process.
Mr. Hyman?
Just one question to Sai's point and Natasha's point. If we walk out of here tonight aligned on January 1, but as a board because we've done this for some other dates, come back and say, might we move by one day or another, any of these dates to allow for full attendance? Is that still okay? We have that flexibility, I assume,
Yes.
by a day or two.
We would have that, certainly more so in the summer months. And we selected the interview schedule based on weeknights. If the board would prefer to bang them all out on a Saturday, that's fine as well. You just need to let us know when that is, because a big part of this also is making sure that our calendars are available for that. And so if you prefer to do a full day of interviews and let me identify what happens in the first round interview. In the first round interviews, they are 45 minutes in length. Every candidate is asked the same question. You want to compare apples to apples. You can start to differentiate your questions in round 2 and 3. There's 15 minutes between each candidate so that the board can generally don't talk about it, but you can, but it gives you the opportunity if you have use the restroom or whatever it is. We also expect that because it's a highly confidential process, that the candidates enter in one door. And then when their interview is done, they don't leave through the same door in case the next candidate's there. So that's part of that process, but it can certainly be tweaked a day or two there, that with keeping in mind the end result is you got to get through the process by October 1st to give the contract to Mr. Palmieri, because and it's all county soups. They're asking for 30 days to review the contract. And then by November 1st, you would have to, at a public meeting, appoint the superintendent, whoever your finalists might be.
Thank
So,
you. Ms.
I have
Reese,
a-
can you give us some, Mrs. Akiri?
There is a task here that says virtual and legal board meets for superintendent contract training. That also requires a board meeting or,
No, that would be with our legal department and our labor relations to just kind of give you steps, on how to negotiate the contract. Keeping in mind, it traditionally is done by your board attorney with the finalist board attorney, but that is available to you. And it would probably, I'd have to ask our legal department. They do it virtually.
no, so basically, are you saying we don't need a date? Like we can attend, so
No,
I can say
you-
I'll attend on August 3rd and
No.
Natasha's like, I'll attend on August 28th.
Right.
No,
When
right?
when you got to that point, with the finalists, then we would work, with our legal department and with your availability and come up with the date.
So we could do it all in one Saturday, too.
Well, the interviews could be on Saturday if you so
Right.
choose. Just
this
if
is-
if that's what you want, let us know. How long you want to go. I would recommend, though, if maybe keeping 1 or 2, or at least for the first round of the weeknights available, just in case you have a lot of candidates and you can't get me, because if you're doing like 9 to 5 interviews, and you take a break for lunch, that's intense. And that really, that's a lot of hard work on the board. So if you have more candidates that can fit in that time, I would just, as a backup, keep one of the weeknight dates or move to the next, again, it's an aggressive timeline to start on January 1. It is definitely doable, but it's aggressive.
Mrs. Akiri?
I have one follow-up. This particular training that you're talking about, the way it's listed on the calendar right now, virtual and legal, board meets with the meets for superintendent contract training.
Mhm.
Looks like this happens before the interviews or the way it's listed, is it before the interviews?
The purpose of that is actually, as Ms. Reese was saying, is the board attorney and the candidate's attorney at some point when you're going ahead with a selected candidate will meet and do the negotiations. The purpose of the virtual training that New Jersey School Boards provides virtually to you is to give you a better understanding of what goes into that. So it's really a training, so that you have more information and knowledge available to you to understand what you're agreeing to.
So, but does that happen before we start the interviews or after, the way it's listed here?
It It could be either.
Yeah, it's really based upon, we don't have the calendar for our legal department, so we
Yeah.
have to give a span of time so that we try to work with them so that they can be available and then work with the date that works for the board as well.
So basically, we need 5 board meeting dates based on what you just said. July 29th has to be, the pool delivery is a board meeting. The virtual legal training on contracts is a board meeting. That's number 2. Then the interviews, as of now, we have 3 weeknights. It could be 1 weeknight or a week or a weekend. So that's the 3rd board meeting. Or if we say 9 to 5 is not doable, then we have to go with 1, 2, 3 meetings for 3 interviews. That's 6, 7, and 8. 8 board meetings required. Is that a correct assumption?
We recommend that you schedule for that. I mean, I will say, there's a fair amount of districts who by the end of the second round of interviews know who their finalist is and don't do a 3rd round. But we like to schedule the date in case you want to do a 3rd round. We want to make sure that that option is available so that the dates are booked for that.
So at least 7 to 8 meetings
Yep.
is a correct assumption.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, and that would be the same, even for the July 1st, 2025, it just wouldn't be as compressed as it is for the January one. You
Dr.
can
Borger?
Space that out more.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions here. July 29th is something called a report on a congruent criteria. What are congruent criteria?
That is, in addition, that evening, we bring the results, whatever happened at the input sessions. And we do input sessions, we do them both in person, which are currently scheduled for the 4th, 5th, and 6th of June. And we also have an online survey that is available to your community. So all of that's the congruent criteria. And what comes out of that may be issues that you might want to ask your candidates, questions that you might want to ask your candidates, or issues you might want to address with your candidates.
Okay, and what is when you say this is on July 29th, also consultant delivers weighted pool to the board. What are the weights?
Could you say that louder, please,
What are
Dr.
the
Borger?
what are the weights for this pool?
Weights.
Weights. WEIGHTED, weighted pool.
Yeah, the weighted.
What are you
So
weighting and what are
it's
the
the same
weights?
No, so the weighted pool is the pool reflective of the criteria that you have proceeded with. Right?
So the weighted pool is, as Jean said, reflective of the criteria. An A, B, and C candidates. A means they meet every single one of your criteria. B is they meet most of them. And C is there's some crucial ones they don't meet, such as they may not have even a certificate of eligibility.
Okay, so there's not actually like a number that's assigned. It's more like a partition of the candidates into 3 sets. Is that right?
We provide you, yes.
A candidate is either an A candidate or a B candidate or a C candidate. That's what you're
Right.
going to tell us.
That's the weighted pool. You can
Okay.
interview any in the
All right.
A and the B list.
And this board approves interview schedule and questions. Why would the board be approving questions? They might be knocking out a question I want asked. Is that
Um,
right?
At that meeting, we bring a list of questions, way more than you can ask. Generally, so that gives you as a board the opportunity to choose questions by consensus. And we don't need the answers, your selections that night of the questions, because the list may have 40 or 50 questions, and in 45 minutes, you can't get through that. But it gives you the opportunity to select what kinds of questions you want to ask in that interview.
Okay, Mr. Hyman, you
Okay.
had your hand up? Okay.
Hmm.
Mrs. Akiri.
So these are questions for NJSBA to ask the candidates before you schedule them for interviews, or are these the questions that the board is going to You give us a list of questions that we have to finalize as a board, and those will be the questions we ask them when we meet them in person?
Yes, in the first round interviews, yes.
And what happens in the second round interviews?
There's another list of questions and then that's when you can start as a board if to ask individual questions. First round, you want everybody to answer, you want to compare apples to apples, everybody answer second. The second round interviews, if you have a follow-up question to a candidate, or you want to personalize it, or you want to look at the information that came from your input sessions and style a question specifically to an issue that came up or something in that, that's what happens in the second round. And what we would do is at the end of the first round interviews, we would give you that in those lists of questions for the next round. You would not need to give that to us immediately. We would just need to have that a couple of days before the second round interviews, your selection of questions, so that we can format it. We will provide for each candidate and each board member a formatted list of questions that has the question and the and space for you to write your answer for each candidate. So if you're bringing in 5 candidates for the first round interviews, or 6 candidates, whatever the number may be, and there's 7 of you interviewing, we will provide each board member with, if it's 5 candidates, 5 sheets with the questions that give you the opportunity to write the answer on for that individual candidate.
Is this how NJSBA, have you done this in other districts? So, because when I looked at your contract, it just said that tonight we have to finalize the input criteria. And forgive me for asking this because I didn't get to review the contract before it was signed. So what if we do not want to, like, have they been districts that have said, we do not want to finalize the first round of questions? What if we want it to be, when in the first round, you're meeting the candidate, you can give us suggestions on suggested questions to ask, but we could ask a question based on their resume, based on their experience.
And the process that we use that's worked for many years is that in the first round, everybody is asked the same questions. And then in the second round is when you bring those candidates, any of those candidates back, that's when you can ask questions specific to their resume or their experience at the second round. But our process and that's been fairly successful, is that the first round interviews all have, the candidates are all asked the same question. Because how do you compare one candidate?
But everybody has a unique resume with unique experience. And has any district been able to say, we want to move away from this, and will you allow that flexibility?
If I may interject here, I think that what we need to establish is that you've chosen New Jersey school boards you selected us in our process to use, and this is the process that we use. So while I understand that you may feel differently, the process we use is the one we do, and we highly recommend it. So we're trying to walk you through it so that everyone is on the same page about the steps and what to expect in it. But I think that, as Patty said, the third round interview, for instance, is really a choice by the board to decide if you feel you need to do that. Some boards find their candidate in the second. The important thing to understand about round 1 as opposed to round 2 is that round 1, you're bringing everyone in. Everyone is being asked the same questions just to see where you are on the basics of their answers. And then on the second round, now is where you can differentiate between candidates. And that could be because you heard something come back from the community. It could be other thoughts that you have. And then that allows you for that opportunity to differentiate with those candidates and those questions.
Thank you. So second round, you don't give us any list of questions. Second round, we basically, What?
We do.
We do, but
You choose, we give you questions, a bunch of, a list an exhaustive list of questions, way more than you could ask. And you select, the board selects the kinds of questions, or if there's a particular issue that came up in your input sessions, and you would like a question to address that, you'd like to ask them. The other thing with our questions is all of our questions have been vetted by our legal department. So we know that they're legal for you to ask, and they don't present a liability to the board.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Mrs. Zakiri? You have one more question. We need to move on to the credentials and criteria.
I have a couple of
Yeah,
questions.
so basically both rounds, I just want to clarify, you're going to give us the list of questions, and if you want to add something, can we add them or no?
In round two. So round one, everyone answers the same questions. In round two, we'll provide the questions and you get to select from an exhaustive list in agreement with what you want to ask. And in round two, you also get to bring in other questions that may present themselves from the feedback
What-
you get from your
What if they
community.
don't present themselves from the input or the feedbacks questions?
And
Can
if
we
it's-
add
yes.
a question?
That's an opportunity to ask a
As a
question.
board though, right? This is a
Correct.
board decision,
It's a board
not an
decision.
individual member decision.
Correct. So that's why we present the questions for both rounds 1 and 2. And we ask the board to give us the feedback of what you've come to as a majority opinion about which is the right. to go
So
with.
if
Right.
I
And-
want to,
And if you want to add a question that's not in that exhaustive list, we need enough time to run that through our legal department first.
and it can be added if it is not a consensus by the board. Is this written somewhere in your contract? Because I didn't see this. Yeah, it's not there in your contract that says you are going to give us the questions. We can't ask any questions. This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Mrs.
what-
Zakiri, this is the firm we hired and this is their process. Mrs. Khanna, you have the floor.
So my question is about evaluation. For all the first and the second and the third round, is there something that you would provide to all board members in a way that we would provide the evaluation in a consistent manner? Like, is there a scale, or can you talk through? I might write 3 words, she might write 10 words. So how do we normalize some of that feedback that's coming out of the evaluation in the first round of the interview?
For the interviews. Well, you would take your notes, however you however you do. You would have a discussion. Well, it could go several ways. We could have a discussion at the end of the first round interviews to just like where people are, where different board members are feeling based on the interview. You could take, 24, 48 hours then to decide, who you'd like to bring back for second interview. It doesn't have to be decided that night. But it really is, it comes down to a consensus of the board as to who you would like to bring back for the second round. And then if you want to do a third round. For your reference, the second round interviews are an hour in length, with 15 minutes in between. So, and the thought is that you may have 10 candidates for first round. You may have 5 or 4 or whatever for the second round. And then if you go for a third round, maybe between 1 and 3.
But what I'm trying to understand is, how do we get that down select from round 1 to round 2? Is there like a sheet that says scoring candidate, on a certain criteria, there's 5 points, 2 points, 1 point? And then is that just adding up points, or is there a different way for the candidate to be evaluated and then move to the next round?
You can assign a number to each question for each candidate. Like they answered your question, maybe a 4, they kind of answered it, mostly answered a 3 down. Many times it comes to a discussion amongst board members on who they would like to see and for their reasons why.
Mrs. Jolly, you had a question.
Yes,
Just coming back to the list of questions, how early can we have a preview of what the questions are? Because if they're a standard set of questions, because obviously this might take some time to agree to, can we have the list of questions for round one at least?
Generally, we give it out on the pool delivery, but I don't really see any reason why we could not email them ahead of time.
Also, there is nothing in your contract that says that this is the process, that you are going to give us questions for, this is the first time I'm hearing it. There is nothing in your contract that says we have to abide. I know we chose this firm and I don't need to be reminded of that, and I'm respectful of that. But I would like to understand under what clause are you going to enforce that we have to take these set of questions and only ask them? Because there's nothing in your contract.
What you hire us for was our experience in our process. Part of that experience is we want to make sure that every question and every step of this process is legally defensible and doesn't put the board in a liability. So if you're going to ask questions that are not on those exhaustive lists that have already been screened by our legal department, we would need time to run those questions through our legal department, because that is what we stand by. We stand by having a legally defensible, confidential process.
So you agree that I'm fine with the first round, every candidate getting the same set of questions. But this is a hire, this is the most critical hire that this district will do for, say, 3 years, 5 years. I hope it's longer because I don't want us to go back to this. How is it okay that, and then each individual candidate comes with their own unique set of skills and experience? If it is somebody, if it's an internal candidate, great. We know their capabilities. We know what are their, pluses and negatives or strengths and weaknesses. But if we are expected to hire somebody whom we have no idea about, but there is something on their resume that stands out exceptionally versus there is something else on somebody's resume or based on, the feedback that we get from you, how is it okay that you will not allow us to add any questions? And it's not even written in your contract.
The ability to add specific questions comes in the second and third rounds. If you're going to ask a specific question in the first round, you need to ask that. Our process is that the first round, everybody gets asked the same questions because you're trying to filter down to who your your best candidates are from that pool. The second and third round is where you can add in questions that may be specific to a candidate. We just need to know what you're going to ask so we can run it by our legal ahead of time.
So
Bradford?
So how long do we have, what is the timeline? When do we have to give you after the first round?
After the first, I mean, I don't know what our legal calendar looks like. So I would say we would probably need a week to run it through legal, because I don't know what their calendar is. I
But we
can't-
can add questions. We have to give them to you to vet them. But
Vet
we
them.
cannot ask any questions that have not been vetted, even though it's not in your contract.
I'm going to ask this part of the discussion to
I just
move
want
on.
clarification. Yeah, I just
Yes.
let her answer. So
Right.
I
Mhm.
just want to know, we cannot add any questions to even in the second round or the third round to a candidate without being blessed by NJSBA, even
I-
though you don't say there is no such language in your contract.
Yes, that is the process. We want to ensure that you have a legally defensible search, and that when you get to your finalists, that there are no legal quagmires that you've gone through.
So would you mind amending your contract to say?
We have a contract that is signed. It is not going to be amended at this point because it is a signed contract between the two of us. I'm going to ask
this is-
respectfully that the board move on to the credentials and criteria, because we don't even have an ad yet, and these questions are going on. Ms. Reese, could you
No,
please
uh,
tell us
Chair-
about
Madam-
professional
Madam
experience?
Chairman, I really have to object to what's going on here. The entire agreement is stated, paragraph 13. This agreement contains the entire agreement between the parties with respect to the transaction contemplated by this agreement and supersedes all prior agreements and understandings between the parties with respect to such transaction. So I don't believe that you are entitled to impose anything beyond this contract. And you're imposing something new that we never heard of before. So I think, I just don't agree that what you're trying to do here is proper.
Well, thank you
So-
for your opinion, but we have
Yeah,
a
but-
signed contract.
We do it, yes, and that says this is the entire agreement. And yet she's now coming in here saying there's other things we never told you about.
That is part of
You
the
will not be
process
able
for
to-
why we hired
Yes,
this
but it
firm.
was, then if that was part of what she wanted to do, and they always do this apparently, then that should have been stated in the agreement.
How
You
we treat
cannot
people
amend the
and
agreement
speak
at
during
the
this meeting will affect our superintendent search.
Excuse me. I have
How
the
we
floor.
treat people when we use words like
Mrs. Stanley?
blessed by NJSBA,
Just a
when we
minute.
Mrs.
say they
Stanley?
didn't have this in the
Mrs.
contract.
Stanley, I'm
this
gonna ask-
hurts
Jack,
our
I have
search.
the
Mrs.
floor.
Stanley, I'm going to ask.
I have the floor. I don't think you can amend the contract at the meeting as you're trying to do. That's all.
Mr. Disler, do you have an opinion on us for this?
I'll just do it freestyle, yes. So I would have to take a look at the contract, right? Again, I think the more specific point again is, sure, I'm gonna take a look.
So just to be clear, though, this is how Berkeley Heights Public Schools does their interviews, is that we have a list of questions for every single candidate that comes before us. We go through and we all have a question that we read to every candidate so that they are all the same and we can look at them exactly the same. This is not something new.
Right.
So what I will add is I've done through a decent number of superintendent searches through school boards and through others. The process they are laying out, not everyone vets it through their attorney per se, but typically the first round is a set number of questions. What again, I would add is, again, this is school board's process. You've chosen school boards. Of course, right? This is your interview process. So a lot of these will be board type decisions. If the board chooses in a way that, look, they're not comfortable with school board's process, right? That can be a discussion you can have as a full board with school boards, and then school boards can obviously say, no, we're moving forward, or we don't feel comfortable. I think that's a fair assessment. But I think, again, it's your superintendent search. If you don't agree with this process as a full board, I think you would have to go back to school boards, and school boards, of course, may say, this is our process, we stand by it, and then we have to make a determination what as a board and what school boards, how do you want to proceed?
Mr. Hyman?
Can can we table the question conversation until we see the actual exhaustive list of questions to see if maybe all our questions are already in there? And at that point, I think I heard we can add other questions. They'll be vetted. I mean, there's no one saying no at this point. It sounds like any question at this point is possible. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We've got some other bridges to cross tonight.
Let's
So,
work on our
with-
ad right now.
Yes.
With
Ms.
all due
Bradford, can we
respect-
get back to the agenda that the NJSBA gave us? We're on number 3, develop criteria and credentials.
Correct. Ms. Reese, can
So,
you go over
Mrs. Bradford,
professional
with all due
experience for
respect,
us?
you are, I just want to put this on the record that this contract was signed by you without sharing or seeking input from the 7-member board.
That is correct.
Yes. So if that is correct and there is no language and we are abiding by it.
But what's the
But-
concern? What is the concern as we sit? That
Yeah,
we
if
won't
I
get to
may-
ask a question? What is the concern?
Yeah, if I may speak, is.
We're waiting
this-
for it. You're
yeah,
going like this to get to the point. Make the point. Round and
Okay.
round. We're here 90 minutes.
Mrs. Akiri, can you ask a question or we're
because
going to
this
move
is a-
on?
Mr. Hyman, there is no need for you, we can do this respectfully. You have
We've been trying. We've been
Yes.
trying. It's middle of May. Let's go.
Yeah, the reason it's middle of May is because meetings were moved from February, and it is not because by me. If it is the meeting didn't happen in February, that's on Mrs. Bradford. And if we are having this conversation right now, if Mrs. Bradford had taken her duties of board president seriously
Ms.
and
Khanna,
sought input.
Now you're just
That is
insulting
enough.
people to their
That is
face,
enough.
which is,
you
which
are
is.
saying-
bringing
We're
the-
going to
Very
stop this
respectful.
conversation now.
Point of order.
This
Did
is
you- did you-
not respectful of each other. We are going to
You
move
did not
on
seek the
to
input from the
our,
board.
what's on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mrs.
so
Reese.
all I'm saying is how can,
Mrs. Akiri, you don't have the floor.
why? I still have to
Mrs.
have a question.
Mrs.
No.
Akiri, we're going to ask
No,
you to
let me ask
stop
you
and we're
this.
going to move on.
No, how can Mrs. Reese come here with certain clauses and say we have to abide by them when they're not there in the contract? If she's
Thank you.
going to enforce them, then she needs to amend the contract. She
Thank you.
cannot say this is my process when it is not
You
even
have been
written in the
heard.
contract.
Thank you. Mrs. Stanley, please stop. Mrs. Reese, could you go on to the professional experience part of the ad and just explain it to us so we can choose?
So, this speaks to what professional experience you would like your candidates to hold, to be interviewed.
Okay.
Again, we recommend that you put preferred and not required, but that's certainly final decision is required. If you want somebody to have a principal certificate or to have 5 years teaching in a classroom as required, that is certainly your prerogative. Just if it's required and a candidate doesn't have it, you can't interview them.
Got it. So
Okay.
for CSA or assistant CSA, preferred or required? Mrs. Jolly?
Since we're being general,
Yeah, let's go down from CSA, assistant CSA, central office principal, classroom teacher, or other. If you could go through all those, what you would
So
prefer.
I guess my preferences would be CSA, principal, K through 12, I guess suburban and similar district.
Thank you. Mr. Hyman?
Yeah, I'll just add preferred for CSA, preferred principal, and preferred classroom teacher or teaching experience. I don't have an opinion on number of years, but some in-class teaching experience, and K to 12 would be the other piece. No other opinions specifically.
Mrs. Khanna?
I would go with preferred CSA or assistant CSA or principal. For the, I guess it's a type of district, I would go for K to 12, similar district. I think the other ones don't matter. In terms of years of experience, I would say, minimum 5 years of experience, either as a principal or as a CSA, assistant CSA.
Thank you. Mrs. Stanley?
I would put classroom teacher required. I would put preferred CSA or assistant CSA, preferred principal, preferred K through 12. I think the similar district and suburban and stuff, it gets a little bit complicated and it's in New Jersey. I don't know if that's relevant, but I do think that K through 12 is preferred.
Dr. Forager?
I rewrote the ad. I wasn't happy with a lot of it, so.
We're just talking on 2 on the checklist, professional
Yeah,
experience.
I'm just gonna give you what I think the ad should look like, okay?
Okay, we're not at that point. We're just working on our checklist. Could you go through that, please?
Your checklist? Just a minute.
On Roman numeral 2.
I'm sorry. Oh, I know. Yeah, but in the end, you're trying to come out with an ad, right? So I just wrote the ad for you. I think that'll short circuit all this stuff. So I'll just give you the criteria. First of all, qualifications, you want a New Jersey administrator certificate or certificate of eligibility required. Every ad I've seen for these positions has that same language. I would prefer experience as a superintendent, not required. I would require 3+ years of administrative experience or previous role as a superintendent, and I would have building level experience as a plus, and experience in a similar pre-K to 12 district would be preferred. So those are my qualifications. Those are the qualifications I think we should ask for.
Thank you. Mrs. Akiri for Roman numeral 2, professional experience.
Is the principal for any level? Is it elementary, middle school, or what does principal mean?
Any level.
Any level, okay. So I would want somebody with CSA and assistant CSA as preferred. K to 12 is a required. We have seen experiences of not having that, and a similar district and a building level principal. And minimum years of experience is 5 for principal, CSA, and classroom experience would be preferred. It would be a plus, but it's not a required.
So
Thank you.
NJSBA did go over things that we should not discuss during this. I think that we are hitting some of those. So again, we need to be careful with our words.
Thank you. Going on to areas of expertise, could you just go over that for us, Mrs. Reese?
Sure. This is just, we recommend, but it's not required, that you choose the 4 most important areas of expertise you would like your candidates to have some experience in. Whether that's curriculum, finance, whether you want curriculum development, all the curriculum items, some of them in finance, what you might want, some of them or all of them, or is there another area of expertise that is specific to Berkeley Heights that you might want them to have some experience in, whether that's building construction or whatever it might be, that's, that's an issue in Berkeley Heights that you want them to have some knowledge of or some experience in.
Thank you. Mrs. Akiri, we'll start at your end of the table. Your top 4, please, for areas of expertise, Roman numeral 3.
What is the point? We are just going to get the questions, right? So
Dr. Forager, your top 4, please, for areas of experience.
Actually, I'm going to give it to you, but I really don't think this is a good way to go about this. I'm sorry we're doing it. I would like to me, the superintendent is actually responsible for everything. And they carry out their priorities or the board priorities through the budget development. So finance, I think, is a critical element. I don't think you can have a superintendent that just is a sort of a hands-off on that. Personnel management, I think, is very important, especially the evaluation skills. Communications to the board and the parents and the community and the staff, I think, is very important. And legal, this is a heavily regulated industry. You have to know all this stuff. I think it takes years to learn it. Maybe not, but if you're a quick learner, but I think legal is very important. So my were finance, personnel management, communications, and legal.
Thank you.
But-
Mrs. Stanley?
Excuse me, I'm not done. Actually, I don't know why we're limiting it to 4. All of these are quite important.
They are. We're just looking for your top 4.
Yeah.
Mrs. Stanley?
I had down curriculum, personnel management, communications, and planning, as these are areas that we are currently looking to improve on.
Thank you. Mrs. Khanna?
Can you maybe explain, we are choosing the top 4 and the ones that get left behind, so to speak, would they not feature in the ad? Is that what it is?
No, they would not be featured because they would not be featured in the ad. But if it's something that people want to ask a question about in the 2nd or 3rd round, that's an option that's available.
Because I mean, they're all important. I agree with everything that's been said so far. On the other side of the page, gifted and talented special education, we have a lot of focus in our district. So I'm a little torn in terms of how you would evaluate whatever input is given here in terms of the top 4.
So there's an example of the ad in the folder, if you would like to look at it.
What I'm trying to understand is the ad is it going to then have sort of 4 sections and sort of the areas that are expected?
if I might say, I think the goal of this, right, is I agree with you. All of them are important, right? So you're putting an ad out there to attract talent to you. And you probably all individually have a sense of what particular items rise to the top that your district would benefit from. So that's why the ad is geared towards attracting the people who would have what is the top, what are the top four as a group, right? But then the interview process would allow you that space in the second and third round to kind of address and flesh out those other areas, right? But you start somewhere, and you start somewhere with just the focus of that. That's what we recommend.
Okay, so we are not limited by not putting a particular area. It's not like we can ask questions.
Right.
We will be
It-
able to ask questions through the interview process. This is for the purposes of kind of highlighting what's important.
Drawing the candidates
Drawing
that
the
you would
candidates,
most
okay.
like to draw to you.
Okay, so I'm going to go with curriculum, finance, communications, and personnel management.
No, but isn't there ask to come
Okay,
up with four
Excuse
that are
me,
going on the
Mrs.
ad?
Akiri, you don't have the floor. Mr. Hyman, your
Yep.
top four.
Sure. My four are communications, curriculum, finance, and personnel management. And just a quick comment. I liked the way that I know it's just a placeholder, but the way it's written right now actually feels like it encompasses more like 5 or 6 if we're being creative. So I'm taking some solace in the fact that I think we're being broad enough. And also I think the candidates are going to get it.
Thank you, Mrs. Jolly.
With respect to planning, I actually think that one should, I'm not putting that on the list. Just a comment that it would, I think, be applicable to almost all of the other ones because there is short-term planning and strategic long-range planning associated with budget, with the, labor, personnel, operations, et cetera. So I'm going to leave that one out because I think it's implicit in the other categories. So I'm going to go with curriculum, finance, personnel, and communications.
Can we add something here that
Excuse
says
me.
others to be?
Mrs. Akiri, you don't have the floor. My choices are curriculum, communications, operations, and technology. Okay. Mrs. Akiri, do you want to come back to you now for your top four
So
or other?
So my concern here is we do receive students from Mountainside.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you're going to put specifically to that in terms of an ad? Because I looked at the sample ad that you created, and why are we limiting ourselves to only 4? Because those 4 are going to be listed on the ad. And if we are doing this for Berkeley Heights, again, and this is the first and the only opportunity for the board, the way Mrs. Bradford explained this to us is this meeting can be as long as we need because of the contract terms. It has to be today. So we can ask questions if it's 90 minutes or 180 minutes or whatever. And we have to agree as a board. So if this ad is going to be specific, why can't we list something in terms of what's unique to our district? Because we are we do receive students. Can we add that as
Yes.
in
if
the ad?
board chooses, yes, they can add that.
And can we do more than 4 on the criteria?
You can, in the ad, do as many as you like. It's just making the ad more, to explain, more readable. If the ad's too long, will people read through the end? But that could be what your intention is. You want the people that read a long ad and go to the end.
But that's
But
also.
Excuse me, Mr. Disler has a comment.
Yeah.
I think this will help. So I've done a number of these. What this section's important, I think, is what's important to your district. So I've had districts that I work with where their number one issue is HR, right? And so they wanted to just emphasize that because they wanted candidates who would have an HR background, right? Their director HR, things like that. I've had other districts where they thought their curriculum was an issue, right? It was a K through 12 district and they thought we have no issue, going through our curriculum. We really want someone with a curriculum background. So I think this section is for the board to say to the candidate pool, look, here is what we are looking for. So some candidates may think, look, I'm perfect for this role because I used to be a director of curriculum. I used to be a principal. I'm really interested in it. So I think, again, you certainly, again, I don't want to speak for your, I think you can make it unique to you, but you certainly want to make it also unique to you to tell candidates, look, this is what we're looking for. If you have this, come apply here, because that's what's important to this board.
Okay,
That helps
so
kind of,
it's going to be budget development, legal, operations, and special education.
Thank you. We're moving on to section 4, leadership qualities. We started at that end. Did you want to amend your choices, Dr. Forager?
Can I just do a little bit of
Sorry.
explain on that?
Do I have the floor?
Did you want to amend your choices?
What I want to say is this, I looked at the ad for, I've collected a lot of these ads, and one of them was Mountain Lakes. Mountain Lakes is K through 12. They actually have a deaf and hard of hearing program, and they mention that. I think that should be mentioned in our ad. And they're a send-receive relationship. And they list their qualifications, which are pretty similar to what we want. And they don't actually list anything under this business about successful candidate will demonstrate expertise in all these things that we have. So that could actually be left out, and you can see what you get.
Thank you. Leadership qualities, going on to number 4. We started at this end.
And these
Mrs.
don't necessarily show up in the ad.
Exactly, exactly.
They do show up in what the kind of person you're looking for. in the
What is
future.
important to you, Mrs. Jolly?
Everything. So since I'm not being asked to number them, I
Right.
say all.
Okay, Mr. Hyman.
I agree. And the 5 that I put ours next to in no particular order were ability to work with the board, obviously, encourages parental involvement, obviously, innovative, strong leadership skills and organizational skills.
Mrs. Khanna.
I think my choices are going to be similar to Jordan's. Definitely the ability to work with the board, conflict resolution skills, encourages parental involvement, innovation, able to function under stress, and definitely strong leadership.
Thank you. Mrs. Stanley.
I have engaging public speaker. I have encourages parental involvement, innovative, assertive and decisive, able to head off crises, and organizational skills.
Thank you. Dr. Forager.
Okay, we're just doing leadership here or doing
Correct.
personal quality characteristic. So
Mhm.
it's number 4. All right. So ability to work with the board, exceptional writing skills, engaging public speaker, conflict resolution skills, and strong leadership skills.
Mrs. Akiri.
I'll go with ability to work with the board, conflict resolution skills, encourages parental involvement, strong leadership skills, and ability to head off crises and ability to function under stress.
I would say ability to work with the board, encourage parental involvement, strong leadership skills, and organizational skills. We'll move on to personal characteristics. Again, these are not part of the ad. Is that correct, Mrs. Reese? These are just our personal. Mrs. Akiri, would you go first, please?
So these do we have to only give 4, Mrs. Bradford?
No.
But after you went around the table, you just said 4 of them. So why are we limiting them to 4? They can be.
They're not limited.
But
What
you
would
just
prefer?
summarize them to be as 4 based on board feedback.
Would you like to add more to your?
Yeah, in leadership, I think many of us gave more than 4. So why
Yes,
are we?
Mrs. Jolly gave all of them and Mr. Jordan gave all of them.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Okay, would you like to move on to Roman numeral 5, personal characteristics, and starting with you, Mrs. Akiri?
Yes. The first one would be honest. Second is ethical. And having a nurturing and characteristic, involved in the community, accessible, child-centered, and a good listener.
Dr. Forager.
I'll make it easy, go in order, ethical, organized, empathetic, good listener, honest. But actually, you want all of these, but
Of course, yes.
so
Mrs. Stanley.
I have visible, good listener, child-centered, and involved in the community.
Mrs. Khanna.
I would recommend ethical, nurturing, organized, empathetic, sense of humor, positive attitude, a good listener, honest, and accessible.
Mr. Hyman.
A lot of overlap. I have ethical, organized, visible, good listener, accessible, and involved in the community.
Mrs. Jolly.
I have ethical, organized, empathetic, visible, a positive attitude, good listener, child-centered, honest, accessible.
I have visible, positive attitude, accessible, involved in the community. Okay. Any other additional qualifications or comments before we close this portion? Yes, Mr. Hyman.
I'll just agree with Tom. In the sample ad, we do list send and receive, and I think that's important.
Yes. Mrs. Akiri? Dr. Forager?
yeah, on the sample ad, it says the district is supported by a staff of 281. Can't read it. Oh, 281. I would just take that out because I don't think that's the right number. And the operating budget is indeed 59.4. And I think you should mention our district, our Governor Livingston High School supports deaf and hard of hearing learners.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bradford. It's very.
Yes,
difficult to hear.
our district supports Governor Livingston, the hard of hearing program.
Deaf and hard of hearing
Deaf and hard of
learners,
hearing,
yes.
yes.
But I don't believe that 281 is correct. It is far more than that. And of course, I can't tell really what you mean by that. I mean, there's certainly, if you're looking about total employees, it's much more than 281. If you're just talking about certified teachers, that's not the right number either. So you don't really need that number. The ads I've seen don't at all.
The numbers that are in, like the staffing numbers, we simply go to the Department of Ed website. Those numbers, for those numbers for staffing, they're reflective of, on the Department of Ed website, the 2021, 2022. If you have different numbers, that's not written in stone, but that was just to get as a sense. The budget number I did take from your last budget presentation for that. But if the staffing is more or less than that, and the student count is more or less than that, which is entirely possible because the Department of Ed website is a couple of years old. It's the most updated it is. But all of that can be changed to be more accurate and reflect actually what's there. This is just on the ad. You can take a couple of days to wordsmith it. It wasn't in the intent to have it tonight, but we would work on with the areas of expertise that came out tonight, the consensus. I have curriculum, finance, personnel management, and communications as having received the best, the most support amongst the board members. And then we would look at adding that in specifically to your ad. And I can email that out to Mrs. Bradford to email out to the board. I am under the understanding, and this is not unusual, that board members would like to have a go at it, to wordsmith it and to make it more reflective as you see it for your district. The goal with the ad is to just have the ad up by either May 30th or June 1st. But now I'm thinking I still need the information by May 31st.
When you say a staff of 281, what kind of staff are you talking about?
Well, it could be certificated staff or other staff.
So,
On the
Uh,
website, on the
all right,
BOE
so
website.
there's,
Yep.
okay, the current count of teachers, Anthony can probably correct me, but I got 278. So the 281, I don't think is right for for the coming year. But more importantly, I don't think you actually need to put that number in there. So we wouldn't have to worry about it.
Thank you. So you're taking our feedback. You'll get back to us with an ad. I will send it to the rest of the board. They have until May 31st to do any wordsmithing and get it back to you.
Can we,
Yes.
I think there's one more section here, right? Section 6, Roman numerical. Any other qualifications or comments?
I asked that already.
Yeah, that's the one that Tom was speaking and then.
Yes,
So.
yes, he
Yeah.
answered, yes.
So can I,
You have something else? Yes, Mrs. Security.
so whatever we give here in these, are they going to show up on the ad or that, any additional qualifications or comments? What is the purpose of that?
The leadership that they show.
No, section 6.
Is there, I heard that, that you have a deaf and hard of hearing,
Yes,
program.
That
Is
will
that
be
something you would like in the ad?
yes.
Somebody with that kind of, and that's where that falls in.
Deaf and hard of hearing, and then the send receive, I think you're going to add that. Can we add a consistent history of being transparent and being accountable to district goals, whatever the district goals are?
By QSEC and by law, the superintendent is held accountable. That's what you do their superintendent evaluation on, or progress towards your district goals. So you don't necessarily need to have that in the ad because that's inherent in their position.
So have you seen any ads where they've mentioned that based on QSAC requirements for a superintendent?
No. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now.
Well, it's my
Okay.
turn, right? to
Oh, I'm sorry.
Comment
Sis-
on,
I'm
on
sorry.
other
Yes.
qualifications. So, it looks like, our special education department didn't get, added in the section 3 area. So I was wondering if we could maybe add that specifically, that we have a very inclusive special education department.
That's the will of the board, sure.
I'm not understanding what you're asking for.
That's my suggestion.
Thank
I
you.
agree with the deaf and hard of hearing and the send receive. I think that those are two great programs that we do offer here, and it would be good for the superintendent to understand that that's the situation they're walking into.
Mrs. Khanna, do you have any other comments?
Less on section 6, more on, we had inputs for the leadership qualities and the personal characteristics. Would you modify the ad, taking the inputs that all of us just provided to incorporate some of those aspects in the ad? I'm assuming this is sort of boilerplate with, specific like numbers that are relevant to Berkeley Heights, and then the qualifications will get modified. But I'm curious, some of the aspects that we highlighted from the leadership or the personal, would that get updated in the ad?
Generally, those qualities and characteristics are reflected more during the interview process.
So
And,
you're not thinking that you would go and modify any of like the introduction to the ad to kind of,
There's a lot of support for many of those qualities and characteristics that as I was tallying as you went through them.
I think also, the goal of the ad is to bring the candidates in, right? So we certainly, that's you're putting your mark on it by having the conversations about what you all are seeing as what you want your candidate, your final candidate to really exhibit. But you don't want to get ahead of yourself when you place the ad that you're being so specific that people may not apply to it. So you want that sweet spot of the right amount of applications. And then the interview process is designed for you to kind of cull that out. through that process. Does that seem right?
Okay, I was hoping that it would be a little bit more personalized, so to speak.
Also, we will put something together, but now the board members can, if you think that there's something you'd like to specifically put in there and wordsmith it, we can try to work with that and then see as you work together, if that's something that you all agree that it should be included, kind of like under part 6, right?
I mean, and as Jean said, the goal is to cast as wide a net to get as many candidates that, I mean, it's going to be specific to Berkeley Heights, but you want to have a nice pool so that you can do your due diligence, you can interview them and narrow down as you go. And as I said, a lot of these characteristics and qualities could show up during questioning, during the interview process.
Mr. Hyman, did you have anything to add for section 6?
It doesn't, it's nuanced, but I mean, we talk about personnel management. I mean, in my head, the words recruiting and retention. I mean, it's here again, creating a district that where people feel inspired, et cetera, but I mean, that feels important versus just management for the future of the district.
And Mrs. Jolly?
I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you. So you will work on the ad, get it back to us, and we will get it back to you by May 31st. Staff and community input sessions. These were already negotiated. These are not for board members. The dates are not for board members.
And can I just?
Yes.
Comment on that? The reason they're not for board members is we don't ask for people's names, and even the online survey, we ask for qualification, whether they're a parent, a community member, but we want their feedback. And so we don't know your community. And if there's board members there, it may not, it may inhibit their discussion or comments that they may want to make. And our experience is that you want as many comments to help you get a pulse on the community, to get the candidate that best reflects the Berkeley Heights community and will move your district forward. Although we just recommend that you not have board members there.
If you do want to attend, please let the board president know. There can only be 3 people there, 3 board members there, and let me know first come, first serve. So here are the dates.
Can
Yes.
I?
Yes.
Can you talk through the process for how would you send a survey out? Is it sending an email to the parents in Power School? Is it putting it on the website? Who can access it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We have some like for the online survey and on the in-person survey. And right now I know you definitely want to do the in-person surveys. The online survey is, I would send a QR code or a link, because it's one thing. And it could be posted on your website. You could send it out to all your parents. You could see if the municipality would post it on their website. However you choose to advertise it to reach the most amount of people is how that would go. And the in-person sessions, that we do, we start with a small presentation to explain the process and the dating to your community. And then we have a series of questions that we ask that are the same on the online survey.
So
When it comes to the community sessions, is it something that is it something that is advertised on the district website? Or is that a web page that you would create for the Berkeley Heights search? And can people, do they have to sign up or can they just show up?
They can just show up. We don't really require a sign up. As I said, we don't really, it's supposed to be as anonymous as possible so that they feel that they're not being judged or whatever. They can really express whatever opinion they may have and whatever thoughts they may have on who to hire for the next superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Mrs. Zakiri, you have a question?
so the question is on the survey, it's just a QR code and it's online. What about, anybody wants to do the survey, like if we have a senior community in the town and they want to have a say, do we even collect any hard copies? Have we factored someone who doesn't have a computer and wants to do it non-electronically?
I've not had that question asked before, but certainly, we can send a hard copy. Somebody at the district would just have to collate it and get the information to us. Yeah, and they can certainly come in person.
They can come, yeah, of
Yeah, I
course,
mean,
they
we'll
can come.
take, well, you know, those are not recorded meetings. We will be taking, between the two of us, taking notes on what the comments are. It's a standard, set of questions, like like what's the most significant strengths and achievements of Berkeley Heights, things along those lines.
So basically, there will be a QR code and an email link for the survey, and
Yeah.
we can work with the township or the seniors or the rec
Mhm.
or anywhere, and then say, can you please circulate this because we are looking for feedback on the most, yeah.
Right, and the in-person, in-person input sessions are set with, your staff and your community. But if there's a request to go meet with the senior citizens, if we can work it into our schedule, certainly we can do that.
Okay,
Thank you. So our dates are June 4th. The BHEA will be meeting at Columbia Middle School in the vocal music room from 3:30 to 5:30. The public meeting will be at the same place, Columbia Middle School, vocal music room, 7 to 9 p.m. And I can pass these to you, Ms. Reese.
Mhm.
On June 5th, the BHEA will be meeting here at Governor Livingston High School. The location in the building is to be determined from 3:30 to 5:30. And then the PTO will be meeting at Governor Livingston High School from 7 till 9 p.m. On June 6th, the BHAA will be meeting at Columbia Middle School, the vocal music room from 3:30 to 5:30. And the public meeting will be at Columbia Middle School, vocal music room, 7 to 9 p.m. So we have those dates set aside, and it has been approved by our field representatives, by the BHEA, the BHAA, and also our PTO. Let's move on now. I think we've interviewed Dr. Forger.
Yeah, I just had a question about the online survey. How do you ensure that there's at most one response per user?
I'm sorry?
How do you ensure that there's only one response per user?
We don't really, we allow them, the survey is set up, it's set up through Microsoft to, they can go back and amend and change their, if they feel like they have more to add, they can certainly go back in and change and add to whatever information they first provided.
So a given person, if they were so inclined, could put it in 10 times.
They could,
Okay.
that's true.
All right, thank you.
It is a trade-off just for the, to keep it anonymous. It's a trade-off so that we're not tracking.
you can issue a unique identifier, like where every person who clicks it gets a unique identifier, and that's what tracks it. That's what also tracks duplicates.
Right, and we don't ask the survey to track it. I know that you can. If you're a computer whiz, you can certainly go in and find the IP addresses. That's just simply not something that we do because.
So it's on us to look at for duplicates, but the survey will not have a unique identifier.
No, that's one of the purposes of the survey, so that it can be anonymous. But we do ask them to identify if they're a parent or guardian, a staff member, a community member, or a student.
There is no, so anybody can write anything and there is
could.
nothing to verify.
This
Okay,
is
yeah,
true.
Yeah. So quick question, Mrs. Bradford, on the date for the community input, how did we arrive at it? Like, we haven't advertised it, so we are going to decide on that date today?
Those were the dates that our field representatives could attend.
And if you don't have a quorum, you don't need to advertise it as a board meeting. It does need to be advertised so you get
Right.
the most response that you can.
So looking at number 6, the interview process, I think we have discussed that enough. Is there any other comments on the interview process from board members?
I do have one other
Yes.
thing.
Ms.
In your
Reese.
packet is a page that starts with building a leadership profile for your new, oh, that wasn't it, I'm sorry. There is one that talks about, this is it, the list of administrative and educational leadership experiences. These are, we ask that you select up to 3 questions. They don't have to be selected tonight, but these will be additional essay questions on the application. They will all be asked, you know, to describe their most effective working relationship between the board and the superintendent. And then these other things would be additional essay questions that they would have to respond to, and you ask them to provide specific information, like if it's like data-informed decision-making is what you select as one of your options. We ask them to be very specific on what that means to them and what they've done toward that.
And when would you like this back from us?
When we're done when you're done wordsmithing the ad, because once the ad goes up, at the same time, the ad goes up on the website at the same time, that everything's done. And so we want to make sure that the application on the website has those questions that you've selected, that
So
the essay questions.
You would like this back to you. We'll collect it at the May 30th meeting and then pass them on to you. So board members, if you'll have this completed by the May 30th meeting to hand to the president, and we will pass them on to our field representatives. Mrs. Jolly.
So, all of these are, again, very important, but I almost think that, so I understand it, we need a consensus on 3 that we would pass along to you. And this would be part of the application process. Some of these, and I know this doesn't preclude us from asking questions about any of these topics at some future point, but it's almost like depending on the resume I see, I may want someone to expand or write an essay on something like this, because if they demonstrated via their resume, for example, like closing of the achievement gap, I may not want to necessarily hear that from that candidate, but I might want to hear that from some other candidate. So it's a lot just to limit to 3 from candidates that might have, demonstrate this experience through their resume. And, yeah, they can write about it, but I'd rather hear from someone who maybe, is not as strong and like maybe get some additional information. So.
Well, I mean, once you get to the 3rd round interview, an essay question or a presentation, and you could do an interview questions. You could ask them to submit a writing sample at that time, and or you can have them do a presentation on a topic of your choosing. So you can address that through the interview process. This is just as much to help you narrow down your field of candidates.
Thank you. Did you, Mrs. Stanley? I'm sorry.
So, I know this is what we did for our other interim candidates as well, right? We asked them to answer a few questions. I think right now, one of the questions is technology for most of our candidates. So I'm just to make sure I look through this, right? It is hard to pick this, but it's going to be a consensus of 7 people. If we look at like just communications, number 1, I would pick either A or B or C, right? I would just pick one of the, I think it's this. Yeah, the building leadership, number 1.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what we're. It's actually the list of administrative.
List
Oh,
of
and
administration.
It's
educational
just this
leadership.
page then,
Yes,
one page
Okay.
by May 30th. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I misspoke.
Okay.
So I do apologize.
Oh,
Can
no
I-
idea.
Can I ask my question here?
Yes. Yes, Mrs. Khanna.
Can you talk through a little bit on the application process and sort of the deliverables that we can expect come through at various stages? So this essay topic, it's not for everybody who's coming in for the first round of the interview. Is that right?
No, the essay question, the essay topic will be on the application. And they must complete the essay. Or if they don't, that speaks something as well. But it's part of the application process of every candidate that applies.
Okay, so the first round and it's all candidates complete this essay. So that's question number one. And then there will be an additional essay depending
three.
or additional 3
Yeah, you
essays.
can select up to 3
Okay,
additional essay topics in addition to the one, so they'd have 4 essays. And when you get access to the online application, you will see all of that. You will.
so
see-
we will see their application letter, we will see the resume, we will see up to 4 essays depending on what we choose here.
Right.
In that round of the process, is there the opportunity for them to like give some sort of a video introduction of themselves, or is that all limited to kind of the formats that you have defined up until this point right now?
And are you asking if they can submit a video?
I'm trying to figure out when is the first time that we will hear the candidate? Is that
To hear them spoken word?
right,
Right, as opposed to, is during the interview.
It is the interview, okay. And there is no flexibility for anybody to submit something additional if they chose to.
There is the opportunity to upload additional information, additional records, additional information into the process. I'm not sure if the system has the ability to accept video. That's something I
It's not
honestly-
something that you usually,
We've not
do.
had that before.
okay.
One of the things, if I could just speak to that, is that
Yeah.
there are, I'm not an attorney, so you have your attorney sitting next to you, but there might be some concerns about having that included in terms of who gets selected to come in based upon a submitted video.
Got
So you may want to consult with your attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs.
Okay.
Bradford, I have,
Mrs. Zakiri?
yeah. So all the communication that NJSBA does, do you, when you're sending information to the district or communicating, can you send it to the entire board?
Sorry.
Can you communicate like all your emails, whatever you're sending, starting from now till we finalize, can those emails go to the entire board?
Generally, we send it to the board president and it's their, what they choose, they can certainly choose to include the entire board.
So what is the SLA on if they receive, so for example, we said we had 4 business days, maybe we'll wait until Monday morning. So once the email comes to the president, it's on the one person, the president, to immediately circulate it. Is that the expectation? Or if that's the expectation? So can you include the president and the vice president? That way we have a contingency on.
We generally send it to the president, and that's kind of speaks more to an internal process that we don't insert ourselves.
No, but
into,
is there a
whereas
concern in sending it to the entire board?
you've asked the question, and my answer is we don't do that. We generally send it to the president.
Is there a legal concern or?
I'm not an attorney. I'm telling you that you've asked the question, and I've said that we generally send it to the board.
Okay, so,
Thank you.
and the expectation is, once we receive it, my only concern is maybe between now and the 31st, when you expect something back from us on this calendar, I think we as a board need to discuss and get back on those board meeting requirements because this is the very first time we're hearing about them. And these are all in summer. So we have to check on our availability and give you back feedback. So if some of these dates don't work for us, what's the flexibility? What's the process? We have to go through the president to you and then,
Go to the president and then we will see if we can adapt our schedule, but we may not be able to, but we will not have interactions with individual board members. We'll deal with the president and the president will bring that information to us.
yeah, I was not asking for a back and like two-sided communication. I was just saying in the essence of time and the timeline being so aggressive, why can't the entire board, we do get emails from NJSBA, they come to the entire board. So, and this is a very aggressive schedule, so can we get that? And the answer is no, we can't get it, and we still have to,
Correct.
and we have to get back to you. So how much time do we have to get back to you? Because the next time we meet as a board is on the 30th. So if some of these dates that are listed here from starting July 29th, just an FYI, will not work for me. I might not be here personally, and if it's an exec session, we can't attend remotely. So I'm just laying it out. And some of the other dates that are there, I might not be here physically in United States. So we have to go and check on our availability to commit to this timeline. So if the dates don't work, then we have to communicate them to you by what, May 30th?
Yeah.
May 30th. Okay.
Yes.
But we also don't need a majority of the whole board. We just need a majority of the board.
That's correct.
Okay, we're going to close this portion. Thank you, Ms. Reese. Thank you, Ms. Cleary, for this. We are going to move on to new business now. And the first thing we're going to talk about is social media policy. Who brought that up and who would like to discuss that under new business?
Mrs. Bradford, can I ask for a 5-minute recess?
We're going to move on. So please go ahead. If you need to
So
use the
we cannot-
restroom,
Yeah,
we're not going to take a break.
okay. That's amazing, yeah.
So would someone who brought up social media want
Yeah,
to
I
talk?
brought it up
Okay.
and the reason for it, I think you've received multiple emails from board members. Mr. Nixon has received the emails. I think early this year, we got a memo from the attorney. And I just want clarity. We have a social media policy, which is very detailed, which is, I do have a printout of it. I just want to understand what is the purpose of having a social media policy specifically listing certain criteria and the concerns we raised with you, because I haven't received any responses back from Mrs. Bradford or you, Mr. Nixon.
Mr. Nixon, would you like to address that?
Sure, and I think I'd like Mr. Disler to weigh in on this as well. We had spoken about social media policy and we spoke about social media policy in our policy committee as well, regarding what's the purpose of having a social media policy and how does it follow? And ultimately, I've asked, what are the options for a board president, a board member, or a superintendent in a situation where a board member brings up a concern about another board member possibly violating social media policy. So if you could speak to, for us, some of the things you shared with me regarding.
Sure. So I'll try to address kind of the start question. Then if anyone has any other questions for me, feel free. So social media uses by a board member is usually governed by the School Ethics Act, right? So some districts have a social media policy, some just rely on the act. Typically, the boards that have such a policy do so because similar to a lot of your policies, right? The law controls, but you want a policy to kind of outline what that means for you as a district, right? And so it's very clear when there's an issue, should we do something, should we not? You have a policy that very clearly outlines it. Again, are you required to have this policy? You are not. It's just a matter of, does the board want said policy? So again, it can give board members guidance on how to proceed. Now, what is the avenue for violating that policy? It's not as if someone can call the superintendent and say, this board member is violating that policy, kick them off Facebook, right? That's not permitted. There's no act that your superintendent can take against an individual board member. They can't call the board attorney and say, this board member is acting unethically, do something about it. I promise you I will not show up at your house and say, please stop doing that. Again, I can give guidance, but that's not my role. It's not your superintendent's role. Really, that's what the School Ethics Commission does. So why do you have a policy in place? It provides a little extra guidance. It sets kind of your values as a board. And usually a policy kind of goes into a little more detail in the School Ethics Act to try to explain to board members, look, this is what we think the act says, and this is what governs our conduct. Does that generally answer the question? Does anyone have more questions they would like to ask? I would ask not specifics, because that would be more of an executive session topic, but broadly speaking, I'm happy to kind of talk about it.
And we have asked NJSBA, they talked about it during the ethics training, social media. We've asked them to return to give us more in-depth training on social media. Mrs.
So-
Khanna?
I have a question just to essentially understand when anything is posted on social media, as a board member, what is the responsibility or what is the limitation in terms of posting information that calls out impact on students, as an example?
Okay, so I'm gonna get this. This is off the top of my head. So typically speaking, there are 4 requirements when you post something on social media. Number 1, you have to put a disclaimer, right? The school boards isn't here, but school boards, the School Ethics Commission will tell you that there is no specific language, but they also approve language in a footnote of a case. So if any board member has a question of what language would be good for me to put, I'm happy to share the footnote from that case as an example, because at least that we know is the School Ethics Commission has approved as appropriate language. So that's number 1. You have to have that disclaimer. Number 2, it's required to be accurate information. Number 3, it can't in any way, I think there's some provision like to the effect of harm staff members. And there is a 4th that I'm going blank on, but I'm happy to share with the board via an email or the like. But that's typically our kind of the 4 when you're posting. Again, we talk about social media. A lot of this language, I'll be honest, comes from op-eds because it predates social media. But that's the general parameters when the board is discussing school-related matters. The idea behind it is they want to be very clear that you as a board member don't lose your rights as under the First Amendment. But then, of course, they then curb your rights under the First Amendment. I'll be honest, they say that like in every case, oh, you have a board member, you have every right. But then again, here are the reasons that you can't say X, Y, and Z. But the most important, I think, is to be very clear to the public that I'm not doing this as a board member, right? Because there's that confusion that could exist. And certainly as an individual, you don't want to make sure, you want to be clear that you're not making this view representing the board, because no individual can do so as an individual board member, albeit some exceptions here and there, but for the most part, specifically on social media, those are kind of the big hits. But I'm happy to email the board as well, further guidance with the footnote and the like. Yep.
So the disclaimer though, right? So we've had some discussion on this. The disclaimer doesn't really protect you if you violate the ethics, right? Like that's
Those upper 2
really,
prongs, yeah.
right. So, right, even our social media policy specifically talks about, right, like reinforcing the code of ethics, right? That commenting on anything that the board is currently doing, right, is unethical. And that all knowledge needs to be public knowledge when discussed in public, right? It should not be something that board members know, right, as board members, but something that has been discussed in a public meeting and the whole public has access to it.
Sorry, so I think what you're saying is, if, for example, you put the disclaimer, but reveal confidential information.
Confidential information, or you discuss a topic that is currently before the board, right? Even if you put the disclaimer, that doesn't really protect you, right? The disclaimer is just to allow the public the inside knowledge that you are a board member.
Correct. So you have to meet all 4 prongs. So
Right.
again, I think you might have hit the 4th one, no confidential information. Again, disclaimer, it can't compromise the board, and it can't
How does this
accurate and go against staff members, right? So
How does
those are
this
kind
also apply to emails, right? Because we've also seen, right, like I might not post something on social media, but if I respond to a member of the public, right, I've seen that some of us have started to put like disclaimers on our emails, but if our emails break any of the code of ethics, right, like supporting board members, supporting staff, right, any of that kind of stuff, or not accurate or truthful, right, like all of that, the email like, we don't have a policy on email, but it's still the same ethics.
Yeah, I get it. I don't want to speak too broadly, right? Like,
Yeah.
if, for example, a board member emails a spouse complaining about a staff member, I don't think that would fall under the ethics. But
Right.
if they're emailing, a group of members of the public, certainly it's possible,
Yeah.
right? Again, School Ethics Commission is just that. It's a group of individuals similar to this board. And it tends to be very fact specific, I'll be honest with you. So it's hard for me to answer all these questions in a vacuum. Could I see a situation where an email is found to be a violation of the act? Sure. Could I see a situation where, do I think that every board member needs to put the disclaimer on all of their emails? I do not, right?
Right.
I think that's one step too far. But certainly, right, I don't think that just because an email can't be similar to social media if you're emailing in a listserv per se.
Right.
Again, I think we're going adrift here from the social media policy. It sounds like you have school boards coming in for ethics training. I would encourage you to have the questions and possibly email maybe those in advance because that's typically helpful, but certainly also I'm here to help guide. It's better to be proactive in these things. So if anyone has any questions in advance, I assume your policy probably says send this to the board president or the superintendent, they can share just to help you get guidance. Because it is, there are a lot of landmines out there. I'll put it, it's not easy navigating this. I continue to remind people, both behind the scenes and in public, that you guys are all volunteers. And it's not an easy job, and the School Ethics Commission in many times does not make your job any easier. So we're here to help in any way we can.
Yeah. So like, let's say, right, the calendar gets approved by the board, right? And I want to post the calendar has been approved by the board. Here's the link, right? I don't need to put a disclaimer on that, right? Because that's public information that I'm sharing as a public.
So I don't want to go so that example is fine. I
Right.
think the next examples get tougher. So I don't want to go in like, yes, you can just do that. Because then we get into situations where people put like little comments, like go to here, things like that. So I guess in a nutshell, if you're just posting a link, you're probably fine. But then if you add a little, but it's very fact sensitive. And I do want to encourage, I want to avoid the very specific questions, right? That's what for your ethics training is. And I have found that when we do those, sometimes it can lead down a road that I don't think we want to go here tonight.
Understood.
So we'll go for more training from NJSBA on our
Tom had his-
social media. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Forger, you had a question?
Sort of, I think you were going down the list of 4 things and you couldn't remember the 4th one, but I think in the course of the discussion, it came out, it was the no disclosure of confidential
I
information.
think that might be right. Again, I'm going off the top of my head here from my last
Yeah.
ethics training that I did. But I'm happy to email out kind of the list we put together of like, here's how to safely do it.
And I just remember going to one of the sessions down at Atlantic City School Boards Convention, and this whole social media area is a landmine. You got to be very careful. Even putting a disclaimer, I think sometimes they said, well, that wasn't really good enough. And then I said to myself, man, just stay off of this thing.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bradford, I have a
Mrs.
follow-up.
Zakiri?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when you say the posts have to be accurate and they cannot disclose confidential information that the public is not aware of, we have seen clear examples where some of the posts were like pay the teachers or giving specific number of students that were going to be impacted by some of the policy decisions this
Well,
board
let's
was
not go
taking.
into specifics because as Mr. Disler just said, he
Can I
cannot do that.
complete- Can I
So
complete my
let's
question?
just wait for the training and then we'll move on from there, put it back to the policy committee. So
Can I-
please don't mention anything that is specific to something that has been posted.
It's already out. Can I finish my question, Mrs. Bradford?
Be
Without
careful.
you- Yeah. It's already out there. It's
Be
posted.
careful what you are saying now in public in repeating something.
And that wasn't posted by me. So I get your warning. And if I don't get interrupted, I just want to say 4 points. There have been multiple instances this year with information that was only privy to the board and some of the information that was posted on there with the 10,000 plus forum, and Natasha can speak to it. We have given you specific examples with screenshots saying these many hundred students are getting impacted. On what basis? Where is the accuracy to that statement? There was no disclaimer put on the social media post. There was a vote that happened publicly.
May your second point then, please, Mrs. Zakiri. I
Yes.
don't want you to get into specific emails that have been posted
I'm not talking about emails. These are specific posts that
on
have,
posts.
yeah, so they're out there. You have seen the
I do
tweet.
not want you to repeat it
Why not?
because I do not want anyone on this board to violate anything in ethics. We're going to have the training and then we will work.
We've all been trained and I
Yes,
have, and I'm,
Mrs.
and I'm
Zakiri,
fully-
I'm warning you a second time.
yes, and I am fully aware with experience on ethics and ethics complaints to speak about it because this very board has used attorneys to even research on probable ethics complaints without any screenshots. So all I'm asking is, we have Mr. Disler here who said there are 4 points: confidential information and accurate statements. And a disclaimer is not necessary, but it has to be stated. So there are specific examples with screenshots of impact on students. How did this particular board member get the specific information on how many students are
Okay,
impacted?
we're going to end this conversation because I'm afraid we're getting into areas that might be an ethical violation.
I'm asking Mr. Disler for a clarification. Can we post or can any board member post without a disclaimer, without any specific accuracy on how they're getting this information? This information was only privy to the board.
Run that by me. Sorry. Run that by me one more time.
So it should be accurate. One of the posts that she's discussing is my post on
Excuse me.
social media.
No, Mrs.
Excuse
Bradford, the
me,
floor was
excuse
mine.
me,
No, Mr.
excuse
Disler.
me.
All right. We are stopping this now. We are not going to continue this on social media. We're moving on. It is closed. We are moving on now
Point of order.
to increasing.
Point of
OPA.
order, Mrs. Bradford.
fine.
You cannot
Mrs.
end.
Zakiri.
Point of order.
Mrs.
We need-
Zakiri,
There is a
we
new
are getting
business.
into accusations among
There
board
is no-
members and I am not going to allow
I
it.
was just clarifying. my
No, there's
question.
no need to clarify.
How can you decide that? On what basis?
Because-
We are ruled by
Thank
Robert's
you.
Rules of Order.
Correct.
You need to
And
tell me
we are stopping
specifically
this conversation
on-
as new
on what
business.
grounds?
We are stopping this because it
You
is.
do not have that power, Mrs. Bradford. With all
Mrs.
due
Zakiri,
respect.
I do. We're moving the business along.
Dipti, as Vice
Thank
President,
you.
I want you to
Excuse
chime in.
me, we're
No.
moving on to new
On what
business
basis can
number
you
2.
No, listen, Mr. Disler, who's a board paid
Correct.
attorney.
And he
yes.
cannot comment on something that was posted
you
by
the
one
one-
board member to another.
Yeah, I'm asking, he asked me to clarify my question and I'm clarifying my question. You cannot shut a board member down. This is on the record. You've done this discriminatory act every single time I open my mouth to speak.
That's not true. And we are
We
not
have-
going to
I-
go
when I-
ahead with
when I
this.
when I go to the State Department of Ed, with the documented evidence, you can defend yourself, Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you,
I'm going to
Mrs.
clarify
Zakiri.
my question.
We are
with-
moving on. Number 2,
Mr.
new
Disler, can
business.
this be shut down? Can this discussion be shut down?
But if she is talking about accusations, Mrs. Stanley,
It has
stop.
to be accurate information that he's
Stop.
actually being able to give to, right? And that is not accurate information. It's
Mrs. Mr.
accusations,
Disler,
which
can
is
you
why we
end
can't
this?
discuss it in public.
I'm gonna,
arbiter of that accurate information right this minute. Let her.
It's my
finish
post.
the
I think I should be
question.
able to
So
speak
I
on it.
wanna
if you're
just-
Going to bring it up.
We were just instructed, we are not gonna do that.
so I
Please.
can't,
No.
I'm not gonna,
We're choosing which board member gets to speak.
Okay,
May-
Mrs.
may I-
Stanley, we're
may
going to
I-
ask for Mr. Dirk
of order.
Ditzler's opinion.
so I'm just,
May I ask for just a 5-minute recess? to-
No,
No.
so I
All
want to
right,
be,
how about a 10-minute recess?
No,
I wanna be very-
wait? No, no, why? can't we-
Mr.
let me-
Ditzler has the floor.
I just want to be clear that I'm not, I can't, ethically, I don't think it's appropriate for me to delve into specifics, right? So if you want to bring up the post, I can't, this isn't an appropriate form, right? I'm not the appropriate arbiter of that. I do want to clarify though, I do have my list here if that's, can I at least talk about? So I can share the disclaimer. So the 4 issues that I brought up, because I was going off the top of my head, but so you need to, again, identify yourself as a board member. Indicate that the post is not authorized by or written on behalf of the board. So that's the very clear disclaimer. Provide accurate information that is not confidential, and then ensure that your action does not compromise the board. I should these are when these issues are concerning the board. You do have every right to comment on whatever goes on in Trenton, even if it's related to schools as a whole. This is just, again, issues that might become before you as a board. I don't want to get into specifics, but if you have questions that won't touch upon that won't get me in trouble, I'm happy to.
Unfortunately, you already went into specifics in your last discussion.
Mrs.
Yeah.
Khanna, you have something to add?
I think let Tom go first and then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, I've seen this phrase, compromise the board. And I've always wondered, what exactly does that mean? What does it mean to compromise the board?
That is a great question. I would love to give you I can give you, again, we can go through cases. That's more for what your training is. It's very, and I don't want to dodge this question because I think it is a fair one. And this is why this area is a landmine for board members, right? Because you're sitting here, you're trying to give opinions at everything. And then you get, again, that question. That's just not for me. That's more, again, the best way to answer it, there are great examples and cases out there that you'll go through during your ethics training. Could I give you a specific definition? I cannot, because the School Ethics Commission has not given us any one. It's similar to them. They take it as fact-based, which I wish, again, I can give you something clearer, but I can't.
So number 2, thank you. Increasing OPMA complement.
Sorry, I had one, hopefully the last follow-up here. What is the advice on somebody going on social media and commenting on a board vote? With no disclaimers, with putting their own words around the board vote?
But again, that is not accurate or clear information.
Mrs.
You are asking
Bradford,
for
at
a
this point,
general.
At this point, I have already said, we have stopped this conversation.
No,
So
only
I'm not
Mr.
going
Dis-
to allow this to move on. We've had an opinion from the attorney. We will wait for the training from the NJSBA on this. Then we will move it to the policy committee.
No, can-
New business
So only-
number
no,
2.
So only Mr. So I want to ask
Increasing
Robert
OPA
point of order.
compliance
Can the
and Berkeley
President do
Heights
this?
Public Schools Committee meeting minutes documentation. Who brought this up and
I
who would
moved-
like to
I
discuss it?
moved to have a 5-minute recess right now.
No.
Can I get a second?
No, we are moving on. We have the public here waiting and it is 9:15. So number 2, increasing. Who brought this
Yeah,
up?
I will second the motion.
Who brought this up?
There is a motion on the floor, Mrs.
We are
Bradford,
not
for a
accepting your
recess.
motion because
We
you
are
never had
not-
the floor.
We are not recognizing the motion. We are moving on to new business at this time. We have the public here.
So basically, as board members, we are humans, right? And we have come here at 6:30. We're asking for a recess nicely.
If you
and
need
res-
to take a break, Mrs. Zakira, you are free to leave at this time.
No,
and
I would
to
like
come
Mr.
back.
Disler to know, I would like to know from Mr. Disler 2 points. Can a board member request for a recess to be put on vote? Then number 2, can a board president unilaterally and dictatorially shut down conversation and limit conversation? I want Mr. Disler to respond. Thank you.
It is the board president is to move the meeting along in a timely fashion. We are now in new business. We have exhausted what we've talked about for social media policy. We're moving on to number 2.
Gail, a point of order. I'm still waiting for an answer to my question.
What was your question?
It was inaccurate
My
information.
question,
So listen, if you
Pamela?
see
Stanley,
Pamela,
Mrs.
you can
Stanley.
stop. I get to talk. That's
Mrs.
only
Stanley,
fair.
stop.
you've had your turn. This is me.
No,
asking
I
a
haven't
question.
finished
Okay.
it. That's the point.
This is what we have to avoid. We are not being respectful. And I am again, for the 3rd time saying, we have stopped this conversation on number 1, social media. We are moving on to number 2.
I
Who brought up
asked Mr.
number
Disler-
2?
Okay, I asked Mr. Disler to answer. Can you do that? Can you shut down conversation unilaterally? Does the board president have the ability to do that?
So, I think there are 2 questions out there that I will, I guess, try to address. So I think the board president does have the right to continue to move the meeting forward, right? If discussion is kind of moving and not productive, I think the board president does have the right to move forward. But I'll answer your second question. I do think there's a motion on the table for a 5-minute recess and seconded. So I do think that has to be voted on. So of those,
Even though it was during, even though it was during discussion, like it
This is during
brought
new
up.
business.
Yeah, like we're in new business. We haven't even gone to public comment and she's just allowed to announce right? Like when she doesn't even have the floor that she wants to.
I think she would have to get recognized. I agree with that,
Right,
but I do
she
think,
was never recognized, right? She was just talking.
again, you're asking me, do I think a board member, again, can ask to be recognized and make a motion for a short
Right, but she
recess?
wasn't recognized.
Sure,
It
but
was my time. I was talking when I was
No.
speaking.
again, I don't want to, I don't want to get debate. If you're asking my two opinions on it, I think a board president, again, in reasonable fashion can move me forward, but I do think a motion for a short recess can be
So
a second.
in a reasonable fashion, meaning when we asked a specific question, she allowed some board members' questions to you to be answered by you. And the moment some other board members ask, she shuts it down. That is discriminatory, okay?
Just
That is
answered
what
your
just.
question.
Okay,
So
are moving
There is
on
a
to
motion on
number
the
2.
floor. There's a motion on the floor, Mrs. Bradford, and
This is,
what.
is it, what is it called when it's a depilatory? What is that called? The dilatory motion?
In what respect? Sorry.
Not pertinent.
So, again, a non-relevant. If you're asking me, if you're asking my recommendation, I think you can move on to new business. I think number 1 is closed. Move on to number 2, and then if a motion again is made for a short
There was
recess.
a motion on the floor, Mr. Disler, when
Then I
I
think-
had a
Make
chance
a
to
motion
speak.
when you interrupt, right?
So
You
then
can't
again,
make
I
a
think
motion.
a speaker can be recognized, make a short motion for a recess. If that is seconded and voted on, then you move forward.
I would like to request to be recognized.
No. Moving on, increasing OPMA compliance with Berkeley Heights Public School NJ committee meetings documentation. Who brought this up and who would like to discuss it?
So I would like to be recognized. I brought this up. I move a motion for a 5-minute recess. Can I get a second?
Okay, roll call.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Curie,
Yes.
Dr. Forger,
Yes.
Mr. Hyman,
No.
Ms. Jolly,
Yes.
Ms. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Stanley,
No.
Ms. Bradford.
No.
Motion
5-minute
passes.
5-minute recess to 9:25. Apologies to the public.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Good. Moving on to new business, number 2. Increasing OMA compliance with Berkeley Heights Public Schools, New Jersey committee meeting minutes documentation. Who brought this up?
I did. And the background to it is the district had some history on Open Public Meetings Act. We've reached out to the county prosecutor on Open Public Meetings Act violation. And I think the last one that I read was a direction and a resolution of a claim that about exec session minutes. This is all public information. It's on there. And that to the previous BA about making sure we had detailed minutes in for exec session minutes. So recently at a a committee meeting, I heard that there was some guidance given on keeping the minutes very high level. And ironically or surprisingly, just 2 months prior, I think everybody was praising the chair for technology committee for writing very detailed minutes. And at the last meeting, Mr. Giordano was also praising Mr. Hyman for giving a detailed record of the minutes. So my concern here is there was a glitch in the Google meeting link. I couldn't join, but it was told to me that the guidance, I don't know who gave the guidance. I would like to understand and know who gave the guidance that we should only do high level minutes. And given the history of this district, I was hopeful that we would do detailed committee meeting minutes because we are discussing important issues, be it about policy, transportation, finance, or technology improvements. And public has every right to know in detail what was discussed. It doesn't have to be verbatim. It doesn't have to be attributed to a person, but they can be bare like, they can be very high level where public is basically scratching their head on what was discussed. So given this history, my first question is, where is this guidance of documenting high level minutes coming from? And then I'll ask my second question.
Robert's Rules of Order. Second question.
Who gave the guidance to the technology? Mr. Hyman, if I can ask you, who gave the guidance?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to this. So first of all, the words high level were mine, so they're not they shouldn't be taken out of context. They were in reference specifically to security or any items related to security that would be included in the minutes. So I think that's important to note that high level did not mean not detailed. In fact, I would stand behind the detail of the most recent technology minutes, which were only shorter because of criticism from some board members about the previous technology committee minutes that were too long. I thought they were both pretty good. They are detailed. They'll be public if they're not public already, so the public can weigh in on that. I do think it's important to note too that the one part of the pushback as committee chair is that minutes are not meant to be verbatim. Number one, they're meant to be summarize the essence of the conversation and hit all the key points. That's number one. Two, and this came up after the last technology committee 2 meetings ago. No comment should be added after the fact in terms of like editorializing. So I think I've been pretty fair as committee chair. I'm not trying to add any opinion to it. The only sensitivity was, especially when talking technology, that we steer clear of anything that would veer into any. Frankly, I made the mistake myself initially. And thankfully to Mr. Nixon, caught a couple of things that we pulled back out of those minutes so that nothing would be shared that compromised the security of the district. So that was the reference. Those are my words, and that's where high level came from.
So you said you got high level guidance to put them high.
Guidance was to
Was
avoid
yours.
anything related to security specifically.
It came from the district administration.
It was discussed at the start of the call
Okay,
as it relates to any security related items. Yes.
okay. But so just to clarify, if there is nothing security related, whatever was discussed, and I document minutes for the last 20 years. So, and I don't believe in putting them verbatim, but
Yeah.
what the topic that was discussed, the discussion and the follow-up action item will be there on these minutes.
I think they're in the latest
Yeah,
version
no,
of
no,
it.
not the
Sure.
technology. I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you agree the reason for putting this on the new business is we have a lot of committees that do meet in closed door sessions.
Yep.
The expectation is the expectation for having these 3-member committee meeting minutes, which are not open to public, is the minutes will document the topics that were discussed,
Yes.
the discussion on those specific topics.
Yes.
And what is the follow-up action item or the outcome of it.
Whatever was discussed. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
So the guidance is specifically in terms of security related items. We will not be the
That was-
meeting minutes, but
Yeah.
again, if we do discuss something that is security related, that can be redacted and then
It
posted,
can.
which is what happened in the latest technology committee minutes
that's
that I
right.
saw.
That's right. And that was discussed too. Historically, if need be, we have that ability. Although I think speaking personally, would like to try to avoid the need for redaction for more work for someone else to have to do
Yeah.
if we can get away with it. So Yeah.
I'm all for it. So that was the whole purpose of this, and glad that it got clarified, that we are going to do detailed minutes, including the topics and everything.
Thank you. Number 3,
So,
separate
sorry, Gail,
conference.
just
Oh,
a
sorry.
quick, just a quick
Yes.
comment that I do agree with Mr. Hyman. I think his minutes are a good example. I think the Finance and Facility Committee minutes are also a good example of what the minutes should look like. Or other,
They're actually live on the website now. Some of our committee minutes. I'm really glad.
Thank you. Number 3, separate conference session board meetings for student, teacher, and staff recognition events. Who brought this up?
I did, and hold on a minute. So basically, I move that for 2024-2025 school year and thereafter, all staff and student recognition events be held only at special meetings dedicated for such events. May I get a second?
No, this is not time to motions on this. The idea of having the students recognized at board meetings is to encourage their parents to come to see them and for us to honor them. If we had a separate one, maybe not all board members would attend and we would not have board members attending. The fact that we have our students, we are here for the students. So we should recognize our student athletes during our board meetings, and before our board meetings and during the superintendent's report.
Just to allow the discussion to continue, I'm going to second the motion.
So just a comment, I think the idea here was not to not recognize our students, because I think our students should be recognized. I think it was more to make it actually more special about them and not be commingled with a regular meeting that then extends the time of the regular meeting when there's a lot of agenda items. So it was, I think the idea here is to just be a little bit more efficient while still honoring, you know, our teachers, our retirees, our students, in a special meeting where I think, you know, all board members do tend to attend special meetings. And if we can plan ahead of time, whether it be, you know, two meetings, biannual thing, that means 2 meetings for the year to recognize the students, or maybe, you know, and likewise, like we have a special meeting to recognize the teachers of the year and retirees. That's the idea behind it. It's to actually maybe even give more focus to them than just being part of a board president's report.
Mrs. Stanley.
So I hear what everyone's saying, which is one of the reasons why we added that extra meeting for the teacher appreciation, right? We're still going to have an agenda for that meeting. It's just that we made sure that we don't have an exec session. We don't have big items on that meeting, but that's why we have a second meeting right later in the month. It's also why we have the May 30th meeting right before, right? So we can keep that 7th meeting a little bit less, right? Because we have run into trouble in the past. But I think having our students here, right, they don't take a lot of time, but it's really important that we remember the great things that are going on in our district and celebrate with those students. And I don't feel like it's taking up so much time, but what would take up a lot of time is our time, right? Like having special meetings for every fall sport, winter sport, spring sport, anytime the band, we want to recognize the band, or one of them, you know, we had in December, we had the music group come, right? Like those things are part of our district. They're part of why we're here. And I think they're really important. And while I understand that, you know, the idea that we move them separately, they'll get more special attention, but I think that that's not what our time is, right? Our time is here, right? Like trying to get meetings done and making the students a part of it is actually the exciting part, right? I love when the students come. It makes us remember all the wonderful things and why we're doing all this hard work, right?
I'm just going to add quickly that
Mr. Hyman.
part of the spirit of this, I think too, we've talked a little bit about this during athletics committee, is trying to go to the moment when those student athletes specifically are being honored. So for example, and we've talked about maybe sampling this at some point in the fall, keep me honest here, Mr. Nixon, which would be maybe we send a couple of board members to fall awards, for example, fall varsity awards. In my own head, it'd be nice to sort of have that as an and, meaning we do that so that we have, because when we do have the fall sports athletes champions come here, tend to not have great turnout. And unfortunately, sometimes I think we get beat to the punch a little bit, maybe at a town level. So it'd be nice to maybe do both, have a quick abbreviated embedded element to maybe hand out the plaques again or whatever it is, at least so that we can get maybe the captains or something, if that's where we wind up. And then also let's go to where there's critical mass, where the full team's there, parents are there, full auditorium. So we're sort of doing both. I know that's more work for maybe some committee members as we go, but I agree with Pam in that instance. It'd be disappointing to lose, outside of 2 students who have to sit and listen to us when they're here, lose all student participation in these meetings.
Maybe the issue is the length of our board meetings. If we shorten the length of our board meetings, we would have more opportunity to recognize students at the beginning.
Can I answer?
Mrs. Khanna.
Yeah. So that goes to having an agenda that's not as packed and more meetings, right? Essentially, it comes down to time that we have in the meeting on that day where we want to recognize our students, the achievements that they have, take the time and make it a little bit more festive than perhaps what is happening right now, which is, you know, it's an agenda item. it's great. We have photo ops, but that's the end of it. And then it's, back to our long meeting. I think that's the spirit of, I agree with what Natasha is saying is if we really want to make it a visible recognition of our students, athletes, and teachers, it's worthwhile to actually plan a celebration and not add it as an agenda item for an already packed agenda meeting.
So if I may add, I
Mrs.
wanted to.
Akiri.
I wanted to say this after I moved the motion because of the way I get allowed to speak. So I have seen multiple board meetings in this district from 2015. And there are multiple parents who were reaching out based on how much time on social media or Instagram our district spends on sports. But when it comes to actually recognizing these very athletes, the parents and the students get maybe 20 minutes. It's during a superintendent's report or a board president's report. And the quality of certificates that are given. And I've said, as I was trained to say, please reach out to the building principal, please reach out to the specific department that you have concerns with. All that I'm requesting based on the history of this district is we've done better. We can definitely organize an event to recognize these students, and the timing of it can be decided by us. It's for next school year. So when we do come up with a meeting calendar, we can decide, do we want a quarterly student recognition event? Student achievement could be in arts, can be in music, can be in robotics, can be, you name it, sports. We can have specific meetings on the calendar that say, starting in January, April, May, like every quarter, we are going to recognize student achievement. We can have separate meetings for teacher appreciation and teacher retirement. It could be teachers, staff, it could be the custodial staff who actually help prepare us for these events. I went to these amazing concerts and middle school musical. I would love to recognize the staff that made it possible, but to put it into an already packed board agenda under superintendent's report is not sending the right message to the community. We can definitely take time away. We can plan for it. We can be proactive and not be reactive and then put this on the agenda. And I don't understand who will be. I'm all for celebrating students. I'm all for celebrating the achievements and for teachers. And we can definitely do better than inviting them to a board meeting, asking them to sit and then take a couple of pictures and then post them on social media. That's all the interaction we're doing. We can't even go and speak to teachers or parents and say, great job, or the way you scored a goal was amazing, because we have a packed agenda to come back to. That's all.
Mrs. Stanley.
I just want to comment that the way the motion was made, I'm not actually sure we can vote upon it because it's technically under the superintendent's report, what they decide they want to do, right? Like we can't say you can't have a student recognition during your superintendent report. So I'm not sure that this motion is actually appropriate. I get that we could maybe say we want to add additional meetings, but I'm not sure we can say that the superintendent can't recognize students during a meeting. Just for saying.
We could table this motion until when we decide on our new school year, get input from the public, get input from our athletes, get input from the staff, and take another look at it when we establish our meeting dates.
Mrs. Bradford, I can reread my motion. It had nothing to do with superintendent's report. That was part of the discussion. The motion is, I move for 2024-2025 school year and thereafter, all staff and student recognition events be held only at special meetings dedicated to such events. And I had a second.
Mr. Disler?
So I have to ask, I guess, did you approve your meeting schedule for the upcoming school year, your board meeting schedule?
For the reorg meeting.
Through the reorg. So I take this motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is almost an amendment to that motion, in that what you're asking for is to add on special meetings specifically to add, student, teacher, and staff recognition. That's kind of, if I'm trying to think generally how this would play out, it seems like you're gonna add special meetings, which again, even though it's a special meeting, if the board's present, it's gonna be board business, you'll still have to have public comment, but you're adding special meetings for the specific purpose of having these recognition events, which certainly the board can do. That's certainly the will of this board, but I do agree, obviously, I think if it's in the superintendent, maybe you do want to limit what can your superintendent report can say, you can do that, but I assume if your superintendent wants to recognize a student here and there.
No, that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
just saying this
Yep.
motion did not have anything about a superintendent's report. My motion did not mention the superintendent.
Yeah. So,
It was very specific for next calendar year when we start planning right now. We plan our events. I'm saying I move that for 2024-2025 school year and thereafter, all staff and student recognition events be held only at special meetings dedicated to such
so
events.
that's why I'm thinking, the way I'm envisioning it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would be amending your board meeting calendar to add special meetings or to change certain meetings to special meetings where they would be just for those student events.
It's not for this year, Mr. Disler. It's for next year,
Yeah,
2024.
for next school year.
Yeah, next
Yeah.
school year, yes.
But am I understanding that correctly? I think that's what the motion would hit on. Right?
Ms. Bradford?
Mr. Nixon.
I think I would just like to suggest before we vote on this, why don't we collect some feedback from the students and their families and the people that run these programs and find out what's more valuable and more meaningful to them as opposed to trying to make a decision, when we first bring up new business together and making a decision tonight.
Also,
Mrs. Stanley.
yes. So also the problem is the motion says that we only do it during these meetings. But again, that's trying to put a cap around the superintendent's report. And I don't think that, right, is what we want to do, because the superintendent should be able to do, right, what they want with their superintendent report in order to, right, let us know what's going on in the district. So I think, again, it would be to amend the schedule, right? The motion should be to amend the schedule to add special board meetings for these things, but not to say we can only have these at these meetings.
Again, special board meetings are very difficult for this board to determine. Mrs. Jolly.
So I think Mr. Disler brought up a point that, because we approved the calendar at the beginning of the year, I guess the new board coming in January for the second half of the school year would need to approve its own. So I don't even know if we can do it for January 1st, and beyond.
So given the history of this board, policies were amended, new policies were created between October and December, which impacted the incoming board. I'm not asking for an unreasonable request. This is coming based on parent feedback. I can give specific examples. I wished that some of the parents who reached out to me had reached out to the building principals with their concerns. And I have seen myself having special recognition events for teachers. And I think when Mrs. Bradford retired, there was a special event that was held. And last year, when we recognized the retiring teachers, it was when you retired and the recognition happened, Mrs. Bradford, it was at the library with a ton of snacks and coffee, and it was time to mingle. Whereas last time there was a table set up here, there was an exec session, and last year people did write to the board about this. All I'm saying is we have every ability to make these events special and celebrate the staff, be it teachers, custodial staff, support staff, that actually make this district what it is, and the students for their achievements, be it in arts, music, or sports. Instead of having them as ad hoc events, we can plan and do a better job.
And this would be a decision of a new board at the reorg meeting when we set our meeting dates. I think it's presumptive of us to do it now. Mrs. Khanna.
Can I suggest that we table it for today, but work with the administration, work with Mr. Nixon to figure out what does that look like? I think we've already had our winter celebration, right? From a sports standpoint. I'm not sure what more is coming up, but could we work with you to figure out what does that look like for, the second half of the year? Okay, can we do that?
See, I'm asking, we do need multiple special meetings for superintendent search, and I'm
Right.
just saying,
That's
between now and
So I think-
I'm definitely willing to work with anybody. I'm just saying, I do not want them added on a regular meeting agenda, which has been happening till date.
Right, so can we table this for the moment, but take the action to work with Mr. Nixon to plan ahead?
So you are amending the motion?
Well, it would have to be.
No, I
No.
I think what she's doing is, what she wants, I think, is a motion to table.
Yes,
we're-
Which I-
motion to table
Yeah.
till we actually have a conversation with Mr. Nixon and the administration
So it-
and
is
come
your-
back with
Is
a
your
plan.
motion to table to a future meeting or to later in this meeting?
To a future meeting,
Okay, that takes a 2/3 vote.
okay?
Or you can just vote on this one.
Do we need a second on that
We do.
table?
It's a motion to table, and since it's bolts.
I'll second it.
inside,
Mhm.
Second motion, the motion to table goes first.
I'll second the motion to table.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote. So the motion is to table.
Ms. Khanna,
Yes.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes.
Ms. Akiri,
No.
Dr. Forager,
No.
Ms. Jolly,
Yes.
Ms. Stanley, Ms. Bradford.
Yes,
Motion passes.
the motion is tabled. That ends our new business. Comments from the public on any topic. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. The board requests that individuals state their name and town of residence or school of attendance for the record and specific action items they are commenting on, and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by the members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or a concern to a resident, that matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statements. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. Is there anyone coming forward?
Jean Kingsley, 9 Deer Path, Berkeley Heights. I've put 4 children through the school district. My oldest is 30, my youngest is a high school senior. So I have been through 3 superintendents at least, multiple superintendent searches, multiple principal searches. And I just want to remind the board that your job is policy setting. As elected officials, it is your job to govern. And that means making sure that there is an adequate budget so that the administration can do their job. And it's picking the key administrators so that they can then govern and do their job. And it's the rest of those people's jobs to dictate the day-to-day curriculum and managing of the staff and all of that. And sitting here for almost 3.5 hours tonight, it's disheartening that there was no conversation from this board about bettering the education of these kids, improving student performance, or making it better for our teachers, or what resources do they need? Those are the questions that you should all be talking about at this table. Finger pointing each other and talking about social media, it's embarrassing. And we are now going down a public search for a superintendent. And if they're watching these meetings, they're not hearing any conversation about how to improve the district, how to support these teachers, and how to turn our kids into rock stars. So I think you all really need to go home and think about, why did you run? Because other people ran against you. You won You're taking up a seat. The number one job you have is to hire a superintendent. I was on the council for 12 years. We had to do some critical things. I had to give up my time to be prepared to do the job. The conversation shouldn't be about, I can't make that meeting or I didn't have enough time. As a board member, it is your job to sit at this dais and be prepared and show up and do the work. So I would just ask that you all really think about why he's sitting here, because anybody watching this is not going to even want to take an interview. And that's embarrassing. I've been fortunate enough to put my kids through an incredible district. You guys need to love this school, need to love these kids, and need to respect all the taxpayers to put you in the seat. It is a gift and you should relish it and treat it with a little more concern for everybody else and not just yourselves. On another note, you talked about not having a policy on Zoom. On the council, we allowed exec session to be in person and with members on Zoom. It seems like there's going to be some difficult scheduling this summer. I would highly encourage you to come up with a policy and do that. I'm sure you can talk to the council side and the administration how we did it, but we were able to modify so that all of the members could be there if necessary, so the business could keep going on as usual. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Debbie Torrero, 170 Lenape Lane. First off, I want to thank you all for being accommodating and setting up all those meetings for your stakeholders, for hiring the superintendent. So thank you for doing that. I'd like to ask a further clarification on 6 HIBs that were dismissed by the Board of Education on May 7th. I'm assuming that these HIB cases have already been investigated by the individual school anti-bullying specialists and were deemed as founded before they were presented to you on May 7th. If this is the case, I have real concerns about the messaging that it's sending to our children and our community. It takes a lot of courage for the victims and their families to speak up when their rights have been violated. And by the Board of Education rejecting a determination made by the anti-bullying specialists, the Board of Education has set Berkeley-ites up for a potential issue with the Department of Education and could tarnish the community's reputation. So I have 2 questions for you. My understanding is the HIBs that have been founded have to be reported to the state of New Jersey. Were the 6 HIBs that were rejected reported to the state of New Jersey, or were they swept under the rug because they should have been reported to the state regardless of the Board of Education's decision? And my second question is, if any of the HIBs involved specific biased characterizations, have these been reported to the local authorities, as this is how the law works?
Thank you.
Eileen Farrow, 258 Diamond Hill Road, Berkeley Heights. I also took issue last week with the 6 HIBs that were rejected. Based on the BOE's rejection of the 6 HIBs presented in the acting superintendent's report on May 7th, I'm inclined to believe, just based on my 20 years of experience here in Berkeley Heights, that some of those HIBs may have been related to race or sexual orientation. With that being said, it is disheartening to know that those 6 were rejected because of the message that it sends. The fact that anyone's board would reject an HIB with any of those bias issues would be an issue in and of itself, because those are clear HIB violations. My hope is that that didn't happen, but my experience in this town is that it probably was. You sat and rejected something that was already substantiated by the building principal, the superintendent, and the team of investigators, which means that the only recourse you leave the victims is to ask that the state get involved. I think common sense prevails when I say that will get messy. As a board member, you are not an HIB investigator. Your purpose is to ensure that the proper steps were followed correctly in an HIB investigation. You went against the approval of your now acting superintendent along with any of your building principals when you rejected it, because those things have to escalate. By doing this, you leave parents no recourse but to appeal to the Commissioner of Education. The drawback from that kind of investigation is more damaging than the BOE just accepting the HIB. The reason that you have this anti-bullying laws to try and remediate a child's behavior towards other people. When you don't do that, you end up with children that become adults who don't take accountability for any harm they inflict on someone else. How much further damage are you causing the victims, and how much more are you enabling perpetrators? An HIB should be used as a teachable moment, not sweeping something under the rug and acting like nothing ever occurred.
Thank you, Mrs. Farrow.
Thank you.
Toya Facey, 440 Timber Drive. I just want to say that I sat in that audience and I was embarrassed to see what happened up here. The level of disrespect to our search firm here. I'm ashamed. As a taxpayer, as a parent, as a stakeholder, I am ashamed that the Board of Education is behaving this way. I did want to just kind of give a few reminders because people need to understand what Robert's Rules actually means. Mrs. Bradford presides over this meeting. If she doesn't recognize you,
Please don't talk about individual board members.
I'm not.
Okay.
If she doesn't recognize you, you can't just speak out of turn. The other thing is the vice president is there for the absence of the president, not using names, just using general rules or roles. So I think it's really important to understand that the president presides over the meeting. Their role is to move the meeting along efficiently, and you have to be recognized. You have to be recognized to make a motion. You have to be recognized to speak. So that's just a little bit on Robert's Rules that everyone has to remember, because it really helps meetings go by really efficiently and make sure that there is process. The other thing that I just wanted to make sure is on public record, because that's what I like to do, is there's a group called the Berkeley Heights Community Watchdog Group. On their social media, they outlined that courtesy busing was a campaign promise made and a win. And two members in October of 2023, where courtesy busing was actually discussed, indicated that they would eliminate courtesy busing, which now courtesy busing no longer exists in Berkeley Heights. This group was started and actually endorsed some of the Board of Education members and frequently publishes extremely negative articles about administrators as well as the district overall. One thing of concern for me as a stakeholder is that there has been some promotion of this group on social media. They have since changed their name to another name. Coincidentally, this probably happened over the last 5 days. And so just as a reminder, I think for the Board of Ed is that you are beholden to all stakeholders. That includes taxpayers, parents, and most importantly, you are in those seats for the children and the kids in this district. And you are also guided by the New Jersey School Act Code of Ethics for Board of Ed members. And we all need to remember that. We should not be endorsing anything. There should be no affiliations with any groups at all. And it is concerning to me that there was a discussion in October of 2023 about courtesy busing, and now it is eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vacy.
Okay, I'll try and make this quick. It's late. Louisa Grossman, 194 Princeton Avenue, Berkeley Heights. Switch gears a little bit. I work with children in our district, Mountainside, Berkeley Heights. I work with children in the districts around us. I work with students in New York, in North Carolina, you name it. So from my perspective, I'm just wondering if we've just finished a cycle of students getting into colleges, applying and being accepted and whatnot. And I'm just curious, is there any way that maybe Mr. Nixon or whoever our next superintendent is, hopefully before then, so it would be Mr. Nixon, could give us some sort of guidance presentation, because I am seeing certain things from my perspective that while happening in our guidance department, while might have been fine 5 years ago or 10 years ago, are really not fine today. Very concerning. And while if you have not kept up with the way things have happened in terms of applying to colleges, getting into colleges, the competitiveness of college admissions, it is just gone through the roof. It's skyrocketed. And there are, so it is very different today than it was even 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And I just would like to see a presentation from our guidance to show how they have evolved along with the evolving nature of college admissions, because I am not seeing it in many regards with my students, specifically here in our district. I'm seeing it a little bit more in other districts I work with, but I really think we have a great district. And I work with students, just for the record, who are incredibly gifted, and I work with special ed students. So I work with the spectrum. I don't just work with the kids with lots of APs, incredible GPAs and SATs and ACTs through the roof. I do work with some of them, but I also work with every student of all different skills. So I just think that I just want to make sure our guidance department, because I'm not seeing it clearly, that we have evolved along with the selectivity process, with the change in how admissions is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Grossman.
Debbie Varnerin, 20 Wardle Ave. Just trying to put, been sitting too long. My pants are all ruffled. I'm going to make the same suggestion that I made to the Berkeley Heights Town Council. Probably we're going back maybe 3 or 4 years. You limit the amount of time that residents can get up here and talk and how many questions they can ask in order to move the meetings on a little quicker. You might want to implement a policy doing the same to board members. I will say that for the most part, Ms. Jolly, Ms. Hyman,
No
Miss-
names.
Oh, I can't say names. I'm so
Please.
sorry.
Thank
For
you.
the most part, the majority of everybody here was very respectful and asked pointed questions, and it moved along. But there's others that I think are just struggling a little bit with getting their points across, and maybe with limiting how much time they have, they'll be able to get a little bit better at it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Farrow, you've been up already. Is there anyone else that would like to go ahead of you? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Ms. Farrow, you've already had your opportunity. Someone who hasn't been up. No. Mhm. Mhm. No, Ms. Farrow, you've had your opportunity. So we need someone new.
Hi, Janice McLean, 48 Klein Place, South Berkeley Heights. Do you have the numbers for the subscription numbers for the courtesy busing yet? That would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. Going back, Mrs. Kingsley, thank you for your comments on the executive session Zoom. We are just piloting our Zoom at our May 30th meeting. So we will have to adjust our policy also and looking at that. In terms of HIB, Mr. Nixon, can you answer anything on that? And along with Ms. Farrow's questions also.
I mean, I certainly could. I would ask Mr. Disler first, though, what's appropriate for me to answer? The two questions that were asked is, were those HIBs reported to the state? And if they were in fact biased acts, were they reported to the Berkeley Heights Police Department? I would say this, we comply with whatever the state requires that we comply with.
That's what I was going to indicate. So we can't talk about obviously the specifics as it relates to individual HIBs. I think if you want to talk about the information that is provided to the state, so there's under the law, right, there's a biannual report to the board and to the state, which encapsulates a large amount of information. I don't know if you want to comment that or Secretary, if I can. I think either is fine. Either is okay. Yeah, do you want, I'll turn. I'll let you if you want to talk about that more generally speaking. And then obviously I'll just add one more thing. We have a memorandum of agreement with the police. I think that's what was being referenced. That talks about bias related reports to the police. That's been recently updated. And I think as Mr. Nixon mentioned, I think the board's policy is obviously it is complied with its requirements. Not all HIBs obviously fall under that category, but some may. And then obviously that's up to the district then to follow the MOA.
Yeah, and just to build upon that, there is a process and procedure for which these things are reported, and yes, we are compliant with all of the things that we're required to do.
In answering Ms. Spacey's questions, yes, we are working with NGSBA on our social media to get more training on that to avoid negative posts. Mrs. Grossman, thank you. We will refer your suggestion for more a guidance presentation update for college admission. Thank you. And Mrs. Varnerin, I am going to work more diligently on the time management. Thank you. And for Mrs. McLean, subscription busing.
I mean, the process is still ongoing with that, but numbers are coming in that we are monitoring and sharing with the board, and probably have more information that we can share on that once the process is complete. I believe the deadline is this Thursday, 23rd. So they're still coming in.
I think if I may ask Mrs. Farrow, you want to know what the current numbers are as of today? Yes, we have. Can they get an update? It's parents are so.
No, I understand it. I mean,
So my
I
question,
haven't been
like,
at my computer
can
looking at
get
those
up from-
numbers all day, so I don't know
So Mr.
exactly
Nick,
what they are.
if you want, like I can speak as a resident and not as a board member. I think her concern was as an impacted parent whose kids used to get courtesy busing, we have now eliminated it. I think everybody in the community wants to know what the exact number of subscription busing signups are. And we do have the data at this data point, and I don't think it's a state secret. We could.
No, it's not a big deal. I'm saying I don't have exact numbers. That'd be the last I saw for subscription signups was at 188.
201.
Well, you've probably seen it more recently than me then.
This morning, it's on the Google Sheets link and I just
Right.
refreshed it.
I'm saying I don't review that sheet.
Can I give them out
As
like
often.
based on what I had as of this afternoon?
I don't think that's appropriate, Mrs. Zakiri, as a board member to respond.
I mean, I can't speak. I mean, it's an ongoing process. Is there
Mhm.
value or concern with sharing details from an ongoing process?
So if there's, I don't know if there's, right, so.
Parents are signing up, like they have dropped checks and parents are signing, if it's subscription busing numbers, parents have taken a Google survey. The data is with the district and data is being monitored. It gets updated on a Google
Oh, I-
Sheet. Yeah, so I'm just asking the administration if they
Yeah,
can just, we're not disclosing anybody's personal identifiers, just numbers on how many people have signed up and by which school, and it's up to you.
Yeah, I think it's up to, obviously, if you have the information offhand, you can.
No,
certainly
I
let's
would
ask-
just be
but you can
careful
also-
because some of these are not single riders, right? So again, right, they might be one from GL, one from CMS. And we also are getting very close to some of our numbers in CMS, right? So we might have to turn down people so that these numbers are going to change, right? So just giving them out blankly is why we wouldn't be doing that. But I think giving an update at the next meeting after the numbers are supposed to be in by, I think, what, the 24th we said? So right at the 30th, right, he can have time to talk to Mrs. Sheehan and make sure that we actually give accurate information. I think that's different than just looking at a spreadsheet and reading a bunch of numbers that doesn't give accurate information.
Yeah, and I think another concern is simply sharing what the numbers are. Is different. Each route is going to have different seats available. So I might give somebody a number tonight and I might say, oh, we heard 350. They said 188. They said 201 as of this morning. I should be good. It might not mean that there's a seat available. So I mean, I would rather give a better answer than maybe share some information that might make people think that, you know, the current seating is different than it is. But at the same time, I don't know.
No,
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
I'm
Nixon.
concerned about the message that it
Mr.
shares.
Nixon, you can I think the message that the community, this is a big change that has impacted the district. And all we are asking is every parent is aware of that caveat that if there is more than expected students signing up for subscription on a specific route, then the district is going to make some sort of a decision. That is not all they're asking for. And this is not the information that you're giving right now is not inaccurate to answer some of the statements. This is coming from a parent subscribing and saying, I would like a seat. And that's all that the parent asked for. If you can say it with a caveat and say, this doesn't guarantee a seat on this route. We are keeping the existing routes and these are the numbers. It's up to you.
Remember, Mrs. Akiri, that you have access to that information as a board member. Okay, if there's no other discussion, we're going to adjourn to executive session. Thank the public for being here. No action will be taken following the executive session. Whereas the Berkeley Heights Board of Education seeks to adjourn to executive session in full compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 10:4-6, and whereas the Open Public Meeting Act provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of the meeting at which it discusses matters related to those identified below, matters rendered confidential by federal law, state law, or court rule, individual privacy, collective bargaining agreements, purchase or lease of real property if public interest could be adversely affected, investment of public funds if public interest could be adversely affected, tactics or techniques utilized in protecting public safety and property pending or anticipated litigation, attorney-client privilege, personnel employment matters affecting specific prospective or current employees. Be it resolved that the Berkeley Heights Board of Education adjourns to executive session to discuss matters related to attorney-client privilege, and be it further resolved that the minutes of the discussion of any of these items will be disclosed to the public when matters have been determined and confidentiality is no longer applicable. Do we have a motion to enter into executive session?
Second.
Vote? Aye. Okay. We are going to move to executive session.
Motion, so moved.
Second.
Aye.